Today we'll be doing our seventh installment in how to improve our planetary karma series. Today we'll be focusing on Buddha or Buddhaya or Buddhaji. This is the emblem of intelligence. The representation of the intellect is one of my favorite and easiest descriptions of Mercury. And today we're going to focus on how to activate our maximum intelligence. So we're looking at intelligence in terms of potential and how we can activate that maximum potential. Also, we want to empower our communication. Communication comes out in a lot of different ways, and we'll look at that with Mercury, speaking, writing, and many other ways as well. But we want to empower that. We also want to get to the full potential in our communicative abilities. And by improving our planetary karma with Mercury, there's an ability to do that. And then ultimately, on a more metaphysical or spiritual level, we want to embody the soul's message, because Mercury is the messenger. On a deep level, it represents our soul's message. So also, to improve our planetary karma with Mercury, we want to embody what the soul's message is. And of course, before we can embody the soul's message, first we have to understand what it is. This is just my contact information, my website, email, Facebook. If you have any questions after our presentation today, or you're interested in any of my professional services, you can always contact me, and here's the best way to do that. So I've broken this webinar down into 6 different parts / 7 different parts, because there was one of the things I did is I posted on the Kṣaṇāti Jyotish Facebook event page. I did a poll. And I took about 20 to 30 different figures, and I said to the community of my page, of all of these different figures, which one shall we look at live spontaneously and the end of the webinar? So the different members of the community have voted, and we're going to look at the Mercury karma with Paramahamsa Yogananda at the end of our webinar today, because he had the most votes as far as what everyone wanted to see. And then second was Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen. And I just kind of felt like Yogananda was just the proper choice here. So the beginning of our webinar will be spent discussing karma with Mercury, the nature of Mercury karma, and how Mercury karma manifests throughout someone's lifetime. So we'll take an in-detail look at the nature of Mercury karma. And then we'll look at Mercury or Buddha's current position. It is currently in the sign of Sagittarius. It is transitioning back into different bhava because of the retrograde position. So we'll look at the current position of Mercury and then also the future condition of Mercury, because it can go back, because right now Mercury is retrograde in the Sagittarius. So we'll talk about all of the influence of Mercury's current position. So to get an understanding of, okay, this is Mercury's energy right now, which is influencing all of us in this way. Then we will go into more specific detail on how Buddha karma, how Mercury karma is variates, or how it differentiates based on the dignity, based on the sign that Mercury is traveling, based on the planets that Mercury is going to be conjunct with. This is very important in understanding Mercury karma and its unique manifestation, because the manifestation is very specific to the planetary dignity. And as we get into what the soul's message is, the combination of Mercury and its sign is a representation of the type of message which the individual soul carries. Then we will focus on how to improve the planetary karma with Buddhaya or Mercury. We're going to go with ancient practices, Ayurvedic practices, lifestyle practices that we can integrate into our lives to improve our planetary karma with Mercury. And this is the most important part of the webinar, in my opinion, because yes, it is very helpful to know how the karma is affecting us. But if we are not seeking to improve that karma, well, then what is the point? And so this is we'll go into a large detail about how to improve the planetary karma there. Then we will go over community examples of Buddha karma. So there are different members of the community who have sent in certain examples to me before our session today, for me to analyze and focus on their Mercury karma, and then how to improve their specific planetary karma with Mercury. So I've integrated 4 examples from the Saptarishis community, and one of them is the divine Madhuraji. So we'll all be very excited to look at her chart together. And then after we look at the community examples, we'll touch on that celebrity example that was voted on, Yogananda, and we'll kind of just do that in an improvisational way, although I have taken some notes on that. And so after Yogananda, we will, if we have time, because if we have already gone 4 hours, we might not be feeling like doing much of the live questioning. But if things have moved quickly, sometimes we'll have some time for live questions, where those of you who have attended the webinar but did not send your questions in will be able to kind of ask your questions live and have them answered live towards the end of the session. And then we'll kind of conclude and just go over a few of the main details. And at that point, hopefully there's a deep understanding of the nature of Mercury karma, as well as how to focus our energy to improve that karma. So I'm very excited for our session today, and I hope all of you are as well.
Yes, truly. Wonderful.
Great. So I always like to start these webinars by summoning the planet, summoning the graha, bringing the energy of that planet into our session. And so to begin this session, I will like to start with traditional Mercury mantra. If you recognize this mantra, I will love it wherever you are in the world if you will chant along. But if you prefer meditation during this portion of the webinar, that is also very nice. So it's really up to your preference. I'm going to do a short silent meditation, then 3 Om, and then I'm going to get into the Mercury mantra for us all to begin to really feel this energy of Budaya, the emblem of intelligence. In other words, let's turn our intelligence on before we even start this webinar.
Yes, exactly. Priyangu Kalaka Shamam Rupenya Pratimam Buddham Samyam Samyagunapatam Tambudam Pranamamyaham Priyangu Kalaka Shamam Rupenya Pratimam Buddham Samyam Samyagunapatam Tambudam Pranamamyaham Priyangu Karaka Shamam Rupenya Pratimam Buddham Samyam Samyagunapatam Tambudam Pranamamyaham Priyangu Karaka Shamam Rupenya Pratimam Buddham Samyam Samyagunapatam Tambudam Pranamamyaham. Om Brahm Brim Braum Saha Budaya Nama. 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 Hari Om, Om Namah Shivaya. Namaste. Welcome, Mercury.
Wonderful it was.
Thank you, Madhurji. So first we will look in detail as to the nature of Mercury karma. Now, Mercury karma has many different aspects, and even though we're going to focus on all of the major aspects today and some of the minor aspects, there will always be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of minor aspects which also show up with this planet. So we're really going to be focusing on the most powerful, the most common, and the most significant aspects of Mercury karma. Now, it's very interesting that both ancient Greek or Roman culture and philosophy, and then Vedic or the Hindu lineage share the same basic understanding of Mercury. So I always think that this is particularly amazing or wonderful when two different countries or two different cultures from different parts of the world at different times believe the same thing. That means that there is something so accurate about their perception that these two cultures have the same basic understanding. And so basically that is Budaya, is Mercury, is the messenger of the gods. Okay. Now it is with this inherent or divine energy as messenger of the gods that Mercury represents the full knowledge of the divine message. And when I say divine message, that's a message of truth, spirituality, and integrity. So divine message doesn't mean that it's necessarily spiritual in its nature. A divine message just means that it is true and that there is complete integrity between what is being said. In here, we're equating divinity and truth. Okay. Now, Mercury karma aims to put the individual in full alignment with the divine message. That means that when we are to improve our planetary karma with Mercury, basically we have to be in alignment with what the divine message is in our lifetime, which dictates or suggests that one must completely understand what the individual message their soul carries, or this unique brand of the divine message, which each is unique to every individual. So basically the Mercury karma is aiming to put you into a relationship with what is your unique message. Now, Mercury karma influences these unique individual soul messages, which are like different aspects of truth. In other words, just because you have one message and that somebody else has a different message doesn't mean that only one message is true and another message is untrue. That is not correct, because basically they're just different aspects of truth. So this individual's Mercury karma has them representing this unique aspect of truth. Then this individual's Mercury karma has them representing this unique aspect of truth. Both of their messages can be true, but they might have no understanding of what each other's messages are. So it's a very unique, individualized message at the first layer of the Mercury karma. Now, when you look at the house position of Mercury, the planetary dignity or the sign that Mercury is in, and the nakshatra that Mercury is traveling in, this particular aspect is emphasized, which the native is to know. So basically, to find out what your specific individual soul message is, you have to look at the sign of Mercury, the house of Mercury, and the nakshatra of Mercury. And if you look at these details, they will reveal exactly to you what your individual message is. your unique message. Now, the ultimate messenger karma with Mercury manifests in 3 different parts. So when we're looking at Mercury Mahadasha, this is how Mercury Mahadasha happens. It happens in these 3 different parts. And whenever we are working on our karma with Mercury, it manifests in these 3 different parts. Basically, these are the nature of how the Mercury karma manifests. The first is the study of the knowledge, and basically that means knowing what the message is. The second part is embodying that message, living your life in an example by it, and actually making a difference with that knowledge. And then the third level is that expression of the soul on the deepest of levels. Now, when we look at this into a more specific timeline, the first step of our karmic process with Mercury is understanding the type of knowledge your soul is meant to contain in this lifetime. In other words, if we don't know what our message is, then we have bad karma with Mercury. In other words, the first level of having good karma with Mercury is understanding what is your message and what is the knowledge that you represent. If you cannot understand what your message is and what is the knowledge that you represent, then you cannot get into these more evolutionary aspects with Mercury, because this is the first step. So the first step is to have the knowledge. In other words, you can't do anything with any knowledge that you don't have. So obviously the first step here is coming to understand what your soul is meant to know and carry as far as a message. In other words, what type of knowledge are you meant to represent throughout this lifetime? That's the first step. This knowledge, as I mentioned, can be figured out what type of knowledge it is, or what type of information or what type of message it is, can be found by looking at this sign, nakshatra, and house position of Mercury. And when we get into Mercury planetary dignity, we'll be looking at some of these individual unique messages depending on the position. Now, if a chart is ruled by Mercury, that means Gemini or Virgo Lagna. If they are in activated Mercury, which means Mercury Mahadasha, Mercury Antardasha, or a return of Mercury in their chart. This will activate the process which uses the buddhi, which is the discretionary factor of our consciousness, the intellect, that which analyzes, to comprehend and expand one knowledge, specifically as it relates to this individual soul message. So if we're going through our karma with Mercury, whether Mercury Mahadasha, Mercury return, or we're just ruled by Mercury, then the intelligence is trying to always understand what one's message is, which means it's trying to grow in its knowledge. So this is the representative of the first step as well, which is heavily activated with Mercury, is to one's knowledge as far as what is the type of knowledge which they are supposed to learn and supposed to represent throughout this lifetime. So that's the kind of the first level of our evolutionary process with Mercury karma. And if we can't understand what knowledge we are supposed to have or what message we are supposed to be representing, then we can't get into the deeper levels of our Mercury karma. So I really emphasize that this is the first step. And if you can't get past this first step, there's a challenging karma with Mercury. The second step of our karmic evolutionary process comes after we completely and fully understand rationally and logically what individual message our soul carries and are seeking to embody that message. So once we already have an understanding of what our soul's knowledge that we are supposed to carry throughout this lifetime, well, then after that point, we seek to embody that message, or we seek to represent that message. We go from talking the talk to walking the walk. So this is the next step of the evolutionary process with Mercury. In other words, sometimes we get stuck through our first level of our evolutionary process with Mercury, which means we have knowledge, we can talk about it, but do we live our lives by that example? Not necessarily. Do we embody that message in everything we do? Not necessarily. And are we constantly sharing that message with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our enthusiasm? Not necessarily. And so that's why this second step of our improvement with Mercury karma is really important. That once we know what the message is, that we embody that message, that we represent that message. And so then with full knowledge of what the soul's message is, those with this strong activated Mercury karma begin to embody the soul's message and knowledge which they have found. So basically, they go from studying, learning, acquiring the knowledge, which is the student, to representing that knowledge, which puts them into the position of more to be like a teacher. And so this is kind of the transformation of Mercury karma, which takes us from student to teacher. And so this is very powerful and essential. Now, this means the native not only knows this unique aspect of knowledge and their understanding that this is their message, this is their purpose, part of their purpose to carry this message, but they are in the process of representing that knowledge and truth in their everyday life. So there should never be actions that those with good Mercury karma take that go against their message. If they take an action that goes against what they're studying or goes against what is the message, what they're supposed to carry, again, you're looking at a challenging vibration with Mercury karma. You really need to live your life in alignment with what your message and your knowledge is to have good planetary karma with Mercury. So again, when we look at, okay, how is my planetary karma with Mercury? You have to look at what step you are in this process. The third and final step of our karmic evolution with Buddhaya is only possible once the other two steps are complete. So again, you can't just jump over the other two steps and get right to the reward of the evolutionary process. But once there is a complete logical and soul level of understanding of what the message you carry is, and you are able to embody that through who you are, then it is part of the third process to share that message. So basically, it's a three-part process in our evolutionary process with Mercury. And depending on where Mercury sits in our chart, its activation and all of these things, we are either in the first step, second step, or third step. But you can see how for every individual, we kind of fall in this process in our evolutionary process with Mercury. And so, so this final step is only possible after you have completed the majority of your knowledge or study of what the message is, and you are able to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, but you are able to embody this learning. You are able to embody this message in everything that you do. Now, once you do this, you have all of that knowledge and it's embodied in who you are. Then the karma is to carry, share, and express that message. So here is some of the challenge that people get in their evolutionary process with Mercury. They want to express their message fully before they either A, fully understand what it is, or B, are able to represent that in their actions. People in their evolutionary process with Mercury, you should have complete knowledge of what you're saying and be able to live your life by that example before you really share that message. That is why in this full evolution, because otherwise there is some level of hypocrisy. There is some level of, even though I know this message and I'm sharing it, well, I can't live my life that way. In other words, some people say, do what I say, not what I do. These people also have bad planetary karma with Mercury. They say, do what I say, but not what they do, because they are not able to live in their life with alignment in terms of what they say. Therefore, they can't achieve the full evolutionary process with Mercury. So here, once you are able to embody that message and know all of its different aspects, then you carry, share, and express that message with complete confidence, with complete courage, with complete enthusiasm, and with complete determination. Because once you know that message 100% and you represent that message, it will be easy to share. That is why some people have, sometimes it's hard to share, it's hard to communicate, it's hard to express. And they say, oh, that's because of my Mercury. Well, there's a way to work through this, karma. You have to know your knowledge at the deepest of level, and you need to represent it. If so, then the communication of it should be natural and should be easy, because this third step only comes after the first two steps are really aligned to properly. And so this is also the nature, the karmic nature of Mercury, but also in understanding that nature, how we can work with those vibrations. This karmic process of the messenger, which is searching for the message, that's the first part. It finds the message, that's still the first part. Then once the messenger searches for the message and finds it, then they embody it. And then once that messenger embodies the message, then with all of the power and confidentiality, confidence, expresses that message. So it is this process of determining the message and expressing it that is deep within the karmic evolutionary process with Buddhaya. So basically, this is the karmic nature of Mercury. There's a message it wants us to know. We are to seek and understand what that message is, usually through study of some kind, some type of knowledge. Once we acquire that knowledge, it should be the next step that we embody and that we represent that knowledge and that we follow that knowledge in everything that we do. In other words, let's say it's my unique message to follow the yamas and niyamas, like it was for Yoganandaji. That was part of his message, the following of the yamas and niyamas. Well, if you're not able to follow the yamas and niyamas yourself, you should not be going around spreading the message that you should be following the yamas and niyamas. That's skipping the second step. You learn the knowledge, then you don't embody it, and then you go and you share it. This also can cause bad karma with Mercury, maybe even in the next lifetime, if we try to skip this middle step, which is we have to represent this knowledge. So that's just a little bit of how Mercury karma manifests. I hope that was helpful to look at. Now, Mercury is called Buddhaya in Sanskrit, which means the emblem of intelligence. And therefore, Mercury karma activates our relationship with the intelligence, the intellectual, the logical, and the rational. It's connected to, Mercury activates the buddhi, which is the discretionary factor of our consciousness, that which analyzes, computates, and understands. We know this as the rational or logical part of ourselves. And Western science would show us that this part of the consciousness takes place on the right side of the brain. This is basically that because Mercury activates the buddhi, it activates the intellect, it activates the discretion, the rational, and the logical. And so those with good karma with Mercury have a good relationship with the logical. They have a good relationship with the rational, and they have a good relationship with the intellectual potential. Now, Mercury karma influences intelligence, the reasoning ability, and rational understanding specifically for each native. So depending on the sign of Mercury, depending on the how, and when we get into dignity, we'll be looking at the specific how, based on its position, the intelligence and the reasoning ability is uniquely influenced. But basically, the intelligence is influenced depending on the position of Mercury. So you have to look at the very specific of Mercury in the natal chart to kind of understand how the intelligence is being influenced. Now, Mercury karma activates our full intellectual potential and seeks to find complete rational and logical understanding in whichever area of life Mercury sits. That means if Mercury's in the second house, you need a logical understanding of materiality and wealth. If you have Mercury in the 7th house, you need to have logical partner, and a partner who is going to logically understand you. If you have Mercury in the 10th house, logical understanding and your intelligence is an important part of the career or the work that you're doing. So again, it activates our full intellectual potential in terms of understanding something logically in whichever area of life Mercury sits. Okay, so Mercury karma activates the need for the native to use their intellectual faculties. In our evolutionary process with Mercury, our intelligence and communicative abilities must be fully empowered and utilized. In other words, let's say there is no activated Mercury karma in somebody's chart, and Mercury is weak in the chart. Well, then this person goes into a Mercury period, let's say Mercury Mahadasha, and then not only is there this influence that they should become slightly more intelligent, but all of a sudden their intelligence becomes the biggest part of their life. Maybe before they didn't even have to use their intelligence, but now because they go in Mercury Dasha, the intelligence is the most important thing. So when Mercury is activated, we are supposed to be using our intelligence. If we are in Mercury period and we are not using intelligence, that is out of alignment. That is not improving our karma with Mercury. This could cause challenges with Mercury. So basically, that intelligence has to be used whenever the Mercury karma is activated. Now, when Mercury is strongly influencing the Dharma Bhava houses in one's chart, or as the Maha or Antardasha Lord, it is suggested that the intellect and the Dharma are deeply connected. So if Mercury is in the 1st house, the 5th house, or the 9th house, this kind of suggests that there is a connection between the intelligence and the Dharma, which is your purpose here. So if Mercury has rulership of these houses, or you find Mercury in these houses, there's something about your intelligence that is part of your Dharma. Therefore, for you to not use your intelligence would be adharmic, outside of Dharma. Therefore, it suggests that you have to use your intelligence to be in alignment with your Dharma. This is very interesting because a lot of time people who are spiritual put a negative connotation on intelligence. They say, oh, intelligence is the opposite of faith. If you have intelligence, then you doubt, then you question, you need logical answer. But from an astrological perspective, intelligence is a part of many people's dharma, and it's a part of many people's moksha. So basically, I think that there should be no negative connotation with the word intelligence or with our intellect. This is something that is part of our process, and I would imagine that the people who are on a spiritual path, who are anti-intellect, that they have bad karma with Mercury. So depending on the position and dignity of Mercury, this intelligence can be a unique, challenged, or superior gift. So if Mercury's in the 1st, 5th, or 9th house, or you're in Mercury Mahadasha, it's important that your Dharma is connected towards your intelligence. But let's say that your Mercury is debilitated. Well, even though it is your Dharma to use your intelligence, if the Mercury is debilitated, this is a great challenge. So it's saying that just because Mercury, it's your Dharma to use your intelligence, doesn't mean that it's easy. You also have to look at, is Mercury acting as a functional benefic here? So is Mercury functionally benefic in the individual chart? That will show that maybe there will be no challenge, or there will be no huge challenge in the karma with Mercury and the intelligence of the individual. So it's easier for them to do their dharma. But some people need to work through this karma, and so it can still be a challenge even if it is part of your dharma. Now, the native will have to use their intelligence and communication abilities to achieve success and prosperity if Mercury sits in or rules the 2nd, the 6th, or the 10th house. So now we're looking at the specific bhavas of Mercury and kind of what they influence. If Mercury's in the 2nd house, the 6th house, or the 10th house, you have to use your intelligence for success and prosperity. Often this is indicated that the intelligence is used to make money, or the intelligence is used as part of the career. So if Mercury's in the 2nd house, the intellect is used to make money. These people are good for investors. They know good investment. For those of you who have Mercury in the 10th house, the intelligence is a part of the career. This is good for writers. This is good for speakers. This is good for people who are teachers, because this is a representation that the intelligence is a part of the work that they're doing. But of course, you have to look at the sign and aspects or conjunctions as well. Now, the native will have to use their intelligence to manifest their dreams and aspirations. In other words, you cannot get to your dreams without using your intelligence. In other words, there's a relationship between using your logic and intelligence and achieving your dreams if Mercury rules or is in the Artha houses, which is the 3rd house, the 5th house, the 7th house, and the 11th house. Now, I included the 5th house because it aspects the 11th house. So if Mercury sits in the 5th house. But basically, yeah, the 3rd house, the 7th house, and the 11th house are really good for using your intelligence to manifest your dreams. Now, as mentioned, if Mercury is in the 4th house, in the 8th house, and the 12th house especially, sometimes in the 4th house, but even stronger in the 8th and the 12th house, there is a relationship between intelligence and moksha. This is a very interesting energy. We could talk a lot about it. But when there is a relationship with intelligence and moksha, there are 2 different ways this kind of manifests. One is you have to use your intelligence to understand what moksha is. This is people who read books about reincarnation, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It helps them understand logically, rationally, what happens when you die, the reincarnation process, the process of karma. In other words, to understand what moksha is, these people have to use their intellect. Which means there has to be a logical understanding, maybe if they've read it or been taught it, what the moksha is. But that also, ultimately, when there is a connection between moksha and intelligence, that the intelligence is like something that prevents us from moksha. So even though we use intelligence to understand what moksha is, that ultimately you have to have faith and trust and surrender the intelligent understanding of moksha. So it might, understanding what moksha is using the intellect might be the beginning of the evolutionary process with the moksha Buddha relationship, but that ultimately one has to surrender their intellectual understanding of things for their evolution. So Mercury karma activates our full potential in terms of evolution, intellectual capacity. And so basically Mercury represents how smart we can become. And there's a direct relationship. There have been studies that show there is a direct relationship between the IQ of an individual and the strength or the position of their Mercury. For example, I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. My brother, he has exalted Mercury. His IQ is 10 points higher than all of the other siblings. So there's basic energy here, and he's like genius. So basically there is this energy where there is a relationship between our intellectual potential, how smart we are, and Mercury. This includes a certain amount of knowledge or ability as it relates to history, science, math, language, and literature. Okay, Mercury karma activates our full potential as well in terms of humor, comedy, and the expression of wit. This is one of my favorite energies as far as the intellectual power. Yeah, our intellect manifests in our knowledge of science, math, and language, but it also manifests in a comedy ability. Sometimes these people with strong Mercury, they are like book smart. They have really dry sense of humor. And then other aspects of Mercury, they might not be that book smart, but they could have an amazing witty sense of humor. In other words, usually comedians, Mercury is one of their strongest planets. And usually it's in a position that has to do with their work or their dharma. So it actually says in the ancient text that Mercury, Buddhaji, has a good sense of humor because of the connection of intelligence. So what is wit? What is humor? It's basically your ability to understand something very quickly and then make a joke based on it. So wit and intelligence or comedy are deeply connected. You cannot be funny without intelligence. And so basically there's this vibration here that also it activates our sense of humor. It activates our relationships to comedy and our comedy abilities in ourself. It is part of this evolutionary process then, when looking at some remedy aspect, but part of the karma with Mercury is that to improve our karma with Mercury, we develop our sense of humor. Those people with bad senses of humor have bad relationship with Mercury. And it might also have to do with the lack of intelligence. Not to be hard on these people, but usually comedy is an intelligence. If you are not finding it funny, maybe you are missing the joke. In other words, maybe the joke is over your head. So basically, to improve our karma with Mercury, you have to develop your sense of humor. And the specific type of comedy of Mercury is wittiness or quick-minded humor. This is often what we call situational comedy. And shows that kind of have to do with Mercury vibration are kind of situational comedies or sitcoms. So Mercury karma also activates our karmic evolution as it relates to social communication. And communication comes from intelligence. So Mercury activates all of our aspects as relates to communication. Now, specifically to social communication is stronger for a Gemini influence than a Virgo influence, because Gemini has a very specific indication for the social intellectual ability. In other words, social relationship is also something that requires a great amount of intellect. You have to understand this person's consciousness is functioning on this level. That's how you communicate to them. This person's consciousness is functioning on. So ultimately, for the greatest amount of social ability, intelligence is extremely. So we talked about all of the major aspects of Mercury. Now we're getting into some of the subtle aspects, comedy and social energy. Our ability to relate to others, individuals, based on our thinking ability and reasoning. That is this social relationship. This is often why those individuals with similar intelligence find each other in life as friends, because there's an ability for you to relate to each other. In other words, the type of people that you should be communicating with on some level are people who think similarly to you for the greatest quality of interaction. But again, there's a diversity there where you also want people who think differently. But this is often why people are attracted to people with similar levels of intelligence or that think similarly. And so it is part of our karmic evolutionary process with Buddhaji that we are to socially interact and we are to communicate with individuals as far as to improve our quality of Mercury that have equal or greater intelligence. This means that you have to be careful about your level of interaction with people who do not use their intelligence or who you would describe as maybe not being as intellectual as you, because your Mercury karma is improved when you are with people who are smarter than you. In other words, you're with people who are more intelligent than you. But it can challenge your Mercury karma if you are with people who lack intelligence. So that doesn't mean that you can't hang out with your friend just because he's not very smart and you are. It just means that you have to be careful about how his intelligence is influencing yours or her. So as mentioned, Mercury karma activates the buddhi, which is the discretionary or intellectual part of our consciousness. Due to this activation of the buddhi, there is an inherent analytical ability. So basically, the buddhi is a discretionary thing. which means it analyzes. So the buddhi is an analytical process. So it automatically, whenever Mercury karma is activated, the buddhi is activated. And therefore, it activates an intense intellectual and analytical process. So ultimately, when Mercury karma is activated, it's also activating an intellectual or a logical analysis of something. And those people who are Gemini or Virgo Lagna, they analyze everything that they see. Those people with Mercury in the Lagna, they analyze everything that they see. They can't even help it. This isn't a negative thing. It just means that they can't really observe something without trying to logically understand what it is. This analytical process that I'm talking about, the buddhi, it divides a larger single unit into a complete collection of its individual parts. So those people with strong Mercury karma, they don't just see a barrel of apples. They see 100 individual apples. Okay? So it takes the one thing and it divides it to all of its individual parts. If you're looking at a computer, you can see all the microchips. If you're looking at a meal, you can see the specific ingredients of the meal. And so, or the spices that are being used, because, when a Mercury person is eating a meal, they go, I can really taste this cardamom. Oh, I can really taste this ginger. They note every individual aspect. So to improve our karma with Mercury is to use this analytical process. Now, obviously, if this is out of balance, it can be stressful, and you want to be able to turn it off. But basically, this analytical process is deeply connected to Mercury. So the intelligence and discretion in this analytical process allows the native to comprehensively see all flaws, strengths, and neutral aspects of what they are observing. This is the nature of intelligence. And by the way, this is really strong with the sign of Virgo. So this vibration is really strong with Virgo. If you have Virgo strong in your chart, there will also be this vibration. But that basically, when the buddhi gets activated and it begins to see all the individual parts of something, Mercury is all about making things better, improving things to an ideal condition. Therefore, when it is analyzing something, it sees all of its flaws. It sees the flaws to remove them. It also sees all of the strengths to embody them. So basically, this analytical process that is activated with Mercury karma, it always sees the good, the bad, and the ugly. And basically, they can't help it. So when they see the ugly, when they see the weaknesses, when they see the flaws, those are important because the logic is focusing on them because those flaws are there so that they can be removed, so that those flaws can be turned into strengths. So it's not like negative thinking. It is like the intellect is focusing on the weaknesses of something so that they can be improved. A lot of times people see this Mercury karma and they're like, this people is always seeing the negative of everything. No, they are just using their intellect to notice the flaws, and those flaws are there so that they can be removed. They will also notice the strengths or the gifts of something. The intellect will focus on that, and it will empower that, also improving something to its ideal condition. Now, this analytical gift and aspect of Mercury karma serves to improve various aspects of life, as I mentioned, to their most ideal condition. This energy is often described as purification. So there is a purification energy which is associated with Mercury. And again, it's stronger with Virgo than Gemini. But basically, this purification is to notice all of the flaws and remove them. Once you remove the flaws, then something has been purified. So the analytical buddhi process of Mercury sees these flaws so they can be removed. The analytical process of Mercury sees the strengths so they can be emphasized and focused on. The analytical process of Mercury also sees all of the neutral aspect of everything, which means once the intelligence notices all the flaws, then the intelligence notices all the strength. Well, then it also will notice everything that's in the middle. And so this is also, this understanding of what is neutral is also helpful for improving things to their ideal quality. So this karmic vibration of Budaya, which is connected to the buddhi, is connected to purification and improving things to their ideal state. This improvement process takes place when we use our intellect. Okay, so we'll get a little bit into the transit at this point. Yeah, let's discuss the transit, and then before we get into the other planetary dignities, we'll take a short break. But I hope that analysis on all of these different aspects of Mercury karma are very helpful in understanding all the different manifestations of how Mercury influences our karma, and then what we can kind of do to work with those vibrations, what we can kind of do to work with those energies. Now, Mercury entered the Jupiter-ruled sign of Sagittarius on November 24th, 2017. Mercury retrograde, because Mercury became retrograde on December 4, Mercury retrograde will transit back to Scorpio on December 11, 2017, so in 5 days. So even though we are currently Mercury Sagittarius, because it's retrograde, on December 11, it will go back into the Mars-ruled sign of Scorpio. By the way, Mercury retrograde will end December 23, so right before Christmas. Mercury will become combust, and we'll talk more about the combustion of Mercury in a little bit, but Mercury will become combust, which means very close to the sun, on December 8th, 2017, so in 2 days. And we'll talk about what that does. And the Mercury combustion will end on December 19. So again, when we look at the condition of Mercury improving, we're looking at the combustion ending on December 19, and we're looking at the retrograde ending on December 23. Now, once the retrograde ends, then Mercury will be traveling in the normal direction and will enter Sagittarius again on January 7th. Okay, and it will remain in Sagittarius until January 28th. So the current position of Mercury in Sagittarius, we will have in and out of this vibration until January 28th. And at that point, the Mercury will go into the Saturn-ruled sign of Capricorn. So when Mercury enters the Jupiter-ruled sign of Sagittarius, it creates a mixed effect. Mercury and Jupiter are considered enemy planets, and therefore this alignment carries some challenging vibration. Now, some astrologers believe on certain degrees, Mercury in Sagittarius is neutral or friendly. So it's not like it's very inauspicious. It's not like, even though these planets are enemy, Mercury does okay in Sagittarius. But Mercury is debilitated in the Jupiter-ruled sign of Pisces, and there's a reason for that. It has to do with Mercury and Jupiter's relationship. So basically, with this vibration, when you get Mercury and Jupiter together, you are going to get, it's going to be more auspicious in Sagittarius than it will be in Pisces. But there will be some challenging vibration that come with that as well. And we might all be experiencing this because of this transit, but those with Mercury in their natal Sagittarius, they're going to be feeling this on a much stronger level as this is the time of their Mercury return. The key challenge of this alignment comes from the differing karmic natures of Mercury and Jupiter, because Jupiter, which is called Guru in Sanskrit, is the representation of spiritual wisdom and faith. Okay, so let's just associate that with Jupiter, wisdom and faith. Now, Mercury, which is the emblem of intelligence, is the representative of the buddhi, which includes the logical, rational, intellectual, basically our common sense. So you're taking faith and common sense. Okay, now, ultimately, if we can come into a balance between faith and spirituality and logic and common sense, then that is a beautiful gift. But these energies are inherently different. These energies are apparently opposing. We can't understand, even though this conjunction will try, that it is somewhat challenging to try to understand spirituality using the logic. That is why I mentioned the word faith. In other words, faith and logic, they cannot really coexist. Because faith means believing something beyond logic. Faith is having trust in something. Faith is knowing something at a spiritual level, but maybe not being able to prove it. And common sense or logic says, if you can't prove it, it's not real. So basically, these vibrations, we'll talk about their positive effect, but because Jupiter and Mercury relate in this way, it can be a tough time for the balance of spirit and intellect. Now, on the positive side, the alignment of Buddha in Sag will encourage powerful and passionate speech because of the fire vibration of Sagittarius. And Jupiter usually has something very meaningful to say. Now, the speech will be oriented towards the Sagittarius vibration, which is about the protection, equality, freedom, and fairness for all living things. So you find yourself, if you look in the news right now, there are people speaking up. There have been negative things that have happened to them, but that were unfair. Now they are speaking those things. They are bringing those things that were hidden to the light so that they are true. One of the things that's very common in America right now is that women were in the 1990s and the 1980s were sexually abused by different celebrities. And now, because of this Mercury and Sagittarius vibration, and also Saturn's in Sagittarius, which is bringing them some punishment for their misdeeds. But the Mercury in Sagittarius is saying, okay, well, now there's a communication going where all of this stuff is getting brought to the surface, and there's a real energy being focused on civil rights for women, fairness for women, and how, what used to happen, and how that there's no place for that kind of treatment anymore. So again, this is part of that Mercury and Sagittarius vibration, is there is a strong amount of communication which is oriented to the protection of others. So when Mercury enters Sagittarius, Buddha becomes a messenger of ethics, morals, and truth from the Jupiter vibration, and makes sure these principles are communicated with enthusiasm and power. So if something is unethical is happening, if something unmoral is happening, there will be a large amount of communication about it at this time. Also, this conjunction is inclined to lead vigilante justice, either through action or communication. What is vigilante justice? That means you take the law into your own hands. Okay, I wrote this on the positive side because if you use communication to take the law into your own hands, basically, if there are some injustices, then this conjunction will seek to use the communication and the intellect to bring justice. So if there is someone who has committed a crime, this vibration will seek to have them get punishment for their crime. So this is a very strong vibration in that people are going to be wanting to discuss people's truth and bring these things to the surface, and then also justice. Now, the action-oriented vigilante justice is not good. If someone does something wrong, if someone does something immoral, we should not go and beat them up. We should not go and attack them. On a spiritual life, we are to practice ahimsa, nonviolence. This type of vigilante justice is not encouraged. Never take things into your own hands physically with someone who has committed an injustice. Because of the Mercury in Sagittarius, use your intellect. The greatest way to win, you can win a battle with your fighting, with your physical, but you can win the war with your mind. So this is the sense here that you want to win the war and not the battle. And to win the war, you have to use your intellect. So this is, again, yes, you will be oriented to bringing justice to those that have who have committed injustices, and you want there to be fairness and equality for those that don't have it. But use your intelligence to make a difference. In other words, use your mind and not your anger. Basically, if there are unkindnesses, that those with this vibration are going to want to correct that. We call this calling out. So you're at a special time in which people are going to be calling other people out. This means that if someone does something wrong, that is immoral or unethical, they are going to be exposed. Now, on the challenging side, the alignment of Buddha and Sagittarius will encourage a challenge for others to hold their tongue, because Mercury communication and then Jupiter Sagittarius is a very fiery communication. So this means that people will be aggressive in their speech, even though their communication will be coming from a place of truth, morality, and ethics. Nonetheless, battles must be chosen wisely. And again, there's this analogy here between the battle and the war. You cannot win every battle. If you try to win every battle, you'll never win the war. So of what you're choosing to communicate and what you're choosing to speak, the battles must be chosen wisely. So if you're getting into a communication battle with someone, that the battle must be chosen wisely. Now, this conjunction indicates this person to always speak their mind. As long as it's not retrograde. If it's retrograde, they will speak their mind, but there will be some shyness around it. Now, so they'll only speak it to people they're comfortable with. So whenever, because of Mercury and Sagittarius, whenever they notice something that doesn't meet the current standard, then the communication seeks to speak it out. So basically, this aspect we talked about with Mercury, where it attaches itself to the flaws, well, this is kind of focused on this area and really speaking out against it. But even though one can speak out and lead by example, in other words, one might be vulnerable to speaking and not holding their tongue. But as we talked about, the most important thing that you can do to improve your planetary karma with Mercury is lead by example and embody these ethics and words in action. But still, they might be prone to notice and criticize others. So we're at a time where the intellectual energy is criticizing other people's morals. So you have to be careful. You should really lead by example instead of criticizing the deeds of others. Okay, so let's take a short 5-minute beverage and bathroom break, an intermission, so to speak. And then we'll get into all of the planetary dignity and the community examples together.
Wonderful. Surely.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome back. Namaste, Madhurji. I can't hear you. Okay. How are you enjoying the webinar so far, Madhurji?
Wonderful. And I'm just going through the charts in my head, and every line, every statement you have made, it's absolutely getting tallied and absolutely correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. So let me get back to the webinar. Okay, great. Is it back on, Madhurji?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So first thing I would like to say is we can't really know the specific energy of Mercury before we look at the planetary dignity. So it's actually essential in really understanding how the karma is manifesting. Yes, we talked about the general aspects of the karma and even some subtle aspects of the karma like humor and socializing. But there is a signification that depending on the position of Mercury and its dignity, there's a profound signification as to the message, as to the power and the auspiciousness of the relationship. If the planetary dignity with Mercury is poor, it shows there's a lot of room for growth in terms of how to improve our planetary karma with Mercury. If the planetary dignity with Mercury is strong, then it's something that we know is a gift, and we really have to focus on this aspect of our gift. Now, Mercury is exalted in the Mercury-ruled sign of Virgo. We have to talk about this because Mercury is the only planet which is exalted in its own sign. There is no other planet which is exalted in its own sign, unless you believe that Rahu is exalted in Aquarius. Then maybe. But basically, there's no real vibration here in which... and also K2 could be exalted in Scorpio. You could consider that, but not generally. Now, Mercury is exalted in Virgo, but depending on the degree that Mercury sits, it has varying auspiciousness. So there are 3 levels of dignity. All of these levels of Mercury in Virgo are good dignity. Now, the exaltation of Mercury is only within the first 15 degrees of Mercury. Okay? And the highest exaltation point is at the end of that 15 degrees. So the strongest Mercury possible is Mercury at 15 degrees. But anything between 0 and 15 degrees is exaltation of Mercury. Now, if Mercury is past the 15th degree into the 16th degree through the 20th degree, that is a Mula Trikona. Mula Trikona is a form of exaltation which is about 80% exalted. So it's about 100% exalted from degree 0 to 15, and then 80% exalted in a Mula Trikona from 16 to 20 degrees. Also very strong, very powerful. And then even past the 20th degree, into the 21st degree to the 30th degree, this is the portion of Virgo which is the natural sign of Mercury, or its own sign. And so this is a powerful position for Mercury. We can call this about a 50% exaltation. So depending on the degree of Mercury, it's either 100% exalted, 80% exalted, or 50% exalted. But all of these positions of Mercury are great. Mercury aligned to Virgo creates a very auspicious and beneficial vibration. Mercury Virgo's inherent karma is that of purification, and we really talked about that when we got into the Mercury webinar portion of the karma. Now, this purification process, it observes the weaknesses and faults and removes them, while also observing the gifts of strengths of something and emphasizing them. So these people that have Mercury in Virgo, they see the good, the bad, and the neutral about everything. Whenever they are seeing something, they are automatically analyzing it. They're analyzing all of the parts that are bad, all of the parts that are good, and all of the parts that are average. And no, they don't have a choice. Mercury Virgo is able to see the absolute ideal, most favorable or improved version of anything. So in this process of the intelligence, they can see, I often describe this as Virgo can see the way things can and should be. Okay. Now, the one side of it's positive, the other side of it's negative. Seeing the way things can be. This is an inherent gift of the Virgo Lagna, which means you're able to see the potential of something. And this is Mercury in Virgo, this is strong. You're able to see the potential of something. You're able to see the gifts of something. You're able to see all of the positives and the good aspects of everything. But automatically, because Virgo thinks that it can be this way or that it can be improved, they automatically think that it should be. Should be is the more challenging vibration of the Virgo Lagna because should is biased. Should is subjective. And just because it should be according to you doesn't mean that that's right for somebody else. And so this vibration, on the positive side, you see the way things can be, but on the challenging side, there might be some bias there, and you might feel like you'll be seeing the way things should be. So just something to play around there with those that have strong Virgo energy. Now, Mercury Virgo is able to see the absolute best version of things, and this allows them to strive for this quality. So because they're able to see the best version of things, they strive to bring things to that state. Now, on a challenging side, this can create perfectionism. Because when you're striving for the best version of something, when you're striving for the ideal version of something, well, another word for that is striving for the perfect. And nothing about life is ever perfect except God. So everything else about life is imperfect. So striving for perfectionism, I guess it's a nice idea, but it ends up being unbalanced. And depending on if Mercury's exalted or just in its natural sign, if Mercury's just in its natural sign, this is actually more inauspicious in terms of there being a high inclination to perfectionism. Those with exalted Mercury, yeah, they're really striving for a high ideal, but sometimes they can keep that within a certain balance. And they can also differentiate between can and should be. Yeah. Now, it can create a hyperactivity and adamant nature. And an adamant nature here is when you're striving for the way things should be, then that is like, oh, well, this is the way things should be, and I'm right, and everybody else is wrong. This is, again, another challenging vibration that you have to be careful a little bit with Mercury Virgo. But again, less so in a complete exaltation versus just a natural sign. Now, those natives with Mercury and Virgo have strong service-oriented karma because Virgo is the sixth sign. It's associated with service. From a spiritual perspective, we call this seva. And it's also associated with the energies of the sixth house, which is the house of service. So there's a strong service orientation when Mercury is in Virgo. This doesn't mean that you're being of service spiritually, although that's the most positive manifestation of it, but it could also mean that you're providing a service, like offering some type of business, because Mercury is also has to do with the Vaishya class or the merchant class. So there's the selling of goods and services that are also part of what I mean by service. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the Mercury exaltation and natural sign and Mula Trikona, which kind of all fall into position in the sign of Virgo, depending on the degree, will variate its auspiciousness. Now we'll talk a little bit about the debilitation of Mercury. I talk a lot about the debilitation, because I often think that a debilitation can be misunderstood, because automatically when we hear debilitation, there's a misconception that that is negative. There's a misconception that is something that is going to be automatically negative. But some of the most intelligent people had debilitated Mercury. My favorite one to mention is always Albert Einstein. But basically, let's not just assume that because it's debilitated, it's negative. Let's say that its expression is unique, and let's look at how that expression manifests. So Mercury is debilitated in the Jupiter-ruled sign of Pisces. The cause of this debilitation, as I mentioned earlier, of Jupiter and Mercury, because of Mercury in Sagittarius, that's kind of neutral position. When you get into the Mercury with Pisces, that's a debilitated position. In other words, there's no sign that Mercury is more uncomfortable. Now, Jupiter, as we mentioned, is the planet of spiritual wisdom, and Mercury is the planet of intellect. So again, we're coming with this conflict, and this conflict is stronger with Mercury Pisces than Mercury Sagittarius, because Pisces is the sign which represent faith. Pisces is the sign which represents wisdom, which is psychic, which come from heaven. And there is no way to understand this aspect of life logically. In other words, when you're looking at Albert Einstein, for example, his knowledge of his genius as far as math, it was actually coming from heaven. It was actually coming from the divine realms. This wisdom, it was something that was connected to his intuition, which is coming from a higher place. And yet he tried to understand it intellectually. E = mc squared. And ultimately, this knowledge is not even, he described what is indescribable with math. Anyway, this is just, I like his example because it kind of shows how the logic and the spirit can become one. And he brought that intellectual knowledge into a spiritual place. So this is very interesting. But these energies are somewhat opposing. Again, the debilitation on the challenging side can create a conflict between the logical aspect of their consciousness and the spiritual aspect of their consciousness. These natives can often be confused when it comes to decision making and whether to favor faith-based spiritual intuition or with what logically makes sense. So basically, when it comes to making decisions, they become trapped. I don't know whether to make the logical decision or the spiritual decision. And because they don't know how to make a decision, because they're not sure which decision to make, the logical or the spiritual, they end up making no decisions at all. And so this can be a challenge in decision making because of the conflict between the logic and the spirit. And so ultimately, faith and logic, like Albert Einstein, must be integrated for these natives. That you must, yes, it is a challenging karma that you have to understand this aspect through logic, but these opposing gunas, these opposing energies, in order to fully improve the karma, they need to be balanced. So ultimately, to know if you have a debilitated Mercury, on some level, your faith and logic are attempting to come together. If you can work on this, it will be of a greater quality to the life. Ultimately, though, faith and logic must be integrated for these natives. But the karma itself creates trouble balancing these dualities. So as mentioned, these energies need to come into balance with each other. But if we choose one or the other in an unbalanced way, it can cause a lot of negative aspects. In other words, if we choose logic without the spiritual, then there is negative consequence. If we choose spiritual without the logical, it's possible there will be some consequences as well. There's an old saying that you should that if you have the ultimate faith. Sorry about that. Birthday. So if you have the ultimate faith, then the logic isn't necessarily necessary for a part of that, but basically there should be some logic with the faith. The saying is, yes, it's good to have faith. So if you go into a, you know, in old times, if someone had a horse and you went into a shop, you would tie the horse outside. But some people were saying, oh, well, I have complete faith, so I'm just going to leave my horse untied. They would leave their horse untied, and then they come back from the shop and the horse is gone. They say, oh, well, I had faith. And no, because this is faith, but where is the logic? You have the individual who went in there with faith and leave their horse outside have no common sense, and really on some level is lacking intelligence. So basically what you want to do is you want to have faith but also tie your horse up. So you want to have faith, but you also want to use your logic to, you know, so it's actually a real combining of energies, and you never want to just abandon one for the other. So on the positive side, it can show a certain type of intelligence which is connected to the spirit. Although these natives might be it might seem like they're communicating from a place of logic, like how Albert Einstein communicated with math, but these natives might be communicating from a place of logic. It might seem that way, but underneath that initial layer of reason might be some type of wisdom which is coming from a higher source. So even though it might be manifesting, you might be receiving that message as a regular, logical, rational message, that underneath the layer of that rational message is spiritual wisdom. So it's also bringing spiritual wisdom into the intellectual message here. This alignment of Mercury in Pisces inclines the native to focus solely on where their intuition is inclined. Okay, I call this intuitive ADD. So those with Mercury debilitated have what you call intuitive ADD, attention deficit disorder. Basically, if the native's intuition, or what we call the sixth sense, is inclined towards something, they will be able to put an incredible amount of focus, intelligence, and study towards it. For example, Albert Einstein's intuition was inclined towards math. Okay, so if your intuition is inclined towards something, you will have an incredible amount of energy to put towards that. You couldn't take Albert Einstein away from a chalkboard for hours and hours when he was on a roll. It's because his ability to focus on that, which his spirit was inclined towards, is extremely powerful. On the other hand, if the native's intuition is not inclined towards something in particular, their ability to assimilate, understand, and focus on the material will be challenged or debilitated. So those with the debilitated Mercury, they often do very poorly in school. Why do they do poorly in school? It's not because they're not smart. It's because their intelligence is only going to be attracted to what their spirit is inclined towards. Therefore, if they go to a regular college and they have to take all of these requirements, well, if their spirit is not inclined to those requirements, they will do very poorly. This shows an inability to focus on something that you're just told to study, that you're told to focus on. And these people, when they're told to do something, especially studying or learning, there's no ability to do well at it. They actually have to be inclined towards learning from their spirit, from their intuition. So otherwise it will be debilitated. And so sometimes this can manifest in for people with Mercury debilitation, you are very smart in one or a few areas, but less than average smart in most. Okay, so you might be more smart in a very specific area, but less smart in other areas. Because basically, you're only smart where your intuition is inclined.
This is very, very true. Very true.
Yeah, and it's interesting because some of the people who are have debilitated Mercury do the best scientific work in one area.
Yes, right.
So now we'll look at some of the different dignities as well to understand the different messages and the different manifestations of Mercury karma. Now, Mercury has auspicious dignity in the Mercury-ruled sign of Gemini. The buddhi, or discretionary factor of the consciousness, is powerfully emphasized, prioritized, and empowered. And so basically those with Gemini and Mercury, the buddhi, the analytical, discretionary, intellectual part of our consciousness, is extremely important and a big part of who we are. Now, particularly with Mercury Gemini karma, the buddhi's power is concentrated as a diverse and external manifestation. Basically, for Virgo Mercury, the buddhi is can focus on one specific thing. Because the buddhi is more linear for Virgo, but the buddhi is more spread out for Gemini. Therefore, the buddhi manifests in a diverse amount of manifestations instead of just one specific. This is why the energy of a jack of all trades, master of none comes up with the Gemini vibration, is because the intelligence is not just concentrated on one specific area, but is spread out over many different areas. It's manifesting in an external way. Therefore, those with Mercury and Gemini are extremely knowledgeable in a diverse array of areas, categories, avenues, disciplines, traditions, cultures, and methods. So they really have diverse knowledge. So they have a diverse amount of knowledge. So knowledge of many, many different areas. And their intelligence manifests greatly over these many different areas, and therefore are given an ability to be efficient and productive at a diverse amount of tasks and responsibilities. In other words, Gemini, Mercury, these people are hyper capable. They are pretty much capable of doing anything well. Basically, there's a deep well of diverse knowledge, which also supports a diverse and rich skill set, which allowed these natives to be good at varying applications and tasks. So again, this knowledge, this intelligence, this buddhi, it's spread out wide, it's spread out externally, and it really gives the individual a diverse and rich skill set in many different areas. And so this challenge that comes with this incredible gift of buddhi is deep knowledge and capability in a diverse well of applications and tasks. So that's the incredible gift, is this deep well of knowledge in all of these different areas. But it can also prevent the ultimate mastery of one thing in particular. So you're getting a trade-off. You're trading off being very good at very many different things for being the best at one. Okay? And it's a karmic trade-off. It shows that you will be extremely knowledgeable and capable in very many different areas, but you might not be the best chess player in the world, or you might not be the number one in whichever thing that you're doing, but you still might be in the top 10 of 10 different things. Yeah, it's a trade-off in which you are gifted to be knowledgeable in all of these diverse areas, but limited in your potential of one. This is why for these individuals, their inclination to diverse areas is the most important. Because if you keep focusing on one, it could be like going up against a wall. You need to diversify that knowledge. Now, Mercury has very auspicious dignity and karma in the natural Venus-ruled signs of Taurus and Libra. Because Mercury and Venus have a positive planetary relationship, so they get along very well. This is due to they work synergistically. So when these planets are conjunction in a chart, often they are working together. Now, when these planets of Venus and Mercury are working together, and so people who have Venus-Mercury conjunction in their chart or a Venus-Mercury aspect in their chart, intelligence, communication, and expressions become more sophisticated, refined, and hold greater value. So those Venus vibrations of sophistication and refinement, they really get brought into the communication and intelligence. And this alignment creates a great value and worth to the intelligence, communication, and speech. And so whenever these Venus vibration and the Mercury vibration are combined, there is a great value to our intelligence, and there is a great value to our speech. It's important, and it's worth a lot. It has a lot of power, and that it's rich. Now, when Mercury aligns to Taurus, and someone might find this familiar, it allows the individual to have a good economic and material sense. They are inclined to have good intelligence as it relates to finances, investments, spending, and their career. These natives are also inclined to accumulate savings and success and prosperity in their varying fields of work. The challenging energy of this conjunction is that it can cause too much mental focus and obsessiveness towards money and the material world. In other words, too much of the brain is thinking about the material. And so these natives are vulnerable to an over-prioritization or an over-emphasis on the material reality. Okay, so they have to be careful about over materiality. And so those with Mercury and Taurus are subject to have success in working with numbers, finances, expensive materials, beauty, art, music, and entertainment. Now, when Mercury aligns to Libra, it supports a vibration of creative communication. This allows the intelligence and message of the individual to be inclined towards art, music, entertainment, and therefore these natives have a unique creativity. So I really like this as far as a creative conjunction. These individuals seek balance and harmony through their speech. And so their speech can be very harmonious and pleasurable to listen to. And often their words can have a creative or beautiful way in which they are expressed. Sometimes these people are really enjoyable to listen to. They're very romantic and sensual in their speech. So they can sound sultry if they're a woman, or kind of, handsome if they're a man. And this gift of beautiful speech, kind and harmonious speech, is strong here. So these people, they're really beautiful with their words. The challenge of this vibration includes a lack of linear expression, and sometimes an overemphasis on romance, pleasure, and entertainment. So these people can get caught up in the pleasures of life, and they can, because they're so attracted to the more Venus vibration, sometimes the Venus vibration can act as a distraction from their intellect. So they could be like distracted by the pleasures of life as well. Mercury has a unique mixed dignity and karma in the natural Saturn-ruled signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, okay? Now, from a traditional perspective, Mercury and Saturn are friendly karmic relationship, which means these planets work together. But whenever Shani is involved, there's going to be a mixed karmic effect, even if the planet that it's working with is friend, because Shani's karma can be malefic. Saturn's influence as Shanaish Charaya means that delays, obstacles, and adversities can be involved. And so there's a positive exchange of energies with these two vibrations because they're friendly planets that allows for a well-calculated, well-organized, and well-delivered speech. These are people with the potential to really take their time and calculate what they're saying, and because of that, what they're saying being even more powerful. In other words, taking the Saturn energy, which is discipline, and putting that into the speech. And so really taking time and energy and organization before you were to communicate something. So this can be a really positive energy in terms of these people can have a really powerful communication things to say, as long as they're patient enough to let them really be processed. The general challenges that come with the Mercury-Saturn relationship is that there is a delay or obstacle in logical understanding and intellectual expression. So because of the Saturn influence, there's some kind of challenge as far as the intellect and communication that shows up. When Mercury aligns to Capricorn, these people very often have communication and intelligence as a key aspect of their life and career, subject to the house position of course, but the 10th sign is Capricorn, which has significations, would have to do with the 10th house as well. This also creates a strong vibration that one's evolution as far as intelligence and communication, so the evolution with Mercury is a slow and steady process. So whenever Saturn is involved, our evolution with Mercury is the turtle and not the hare. So it's a real slow and steady process. These individuals are usually extremely intelligent. Mercury Capricorn people are smart, but also at times in certain areas are considered slow learners. They might be slow learners, but when they learn it, they might know it better than most people. They may take more time to learn the material, but that material is more integrated throughout the education process. So it's also something that they have integrated throughout the education process. So on the positive side, this conjunction has a strong support for great success, prosperity, and achievement if intelligence, service, or communication-oriented careers. So if the intelligence and the communication are part of your career and you have Mercury in Capricorn, you will usually be very, very successful. And often those with Mercury in Capricorn are also good politicians, if there's such thing. Now, on the challenging side, these conjunctions can cause delays, obstacles, and adversity in one's career path, learning, personal expressions, and communication. And so sometimes with those with Mercury in Capricorn, there is some challenge in their intelligence or expression earlier in their life, which means it can be something that they grow out of, but it's possibly earlier in their life that they will have a learning disability or a speech impediment. Okay, like a lisp. Now, when Mercury aligns to Aquarius, these natives are very unique and innovative in their intelligence and consciousness. Mercury is an innovative planet. Aquarius is an innovative sign. So when you get these vibrations together, very innovative. They are very often inclined to technology because technology and innovation are close. And they have a way of being in alignment with what is the most advanced in terms of technology at any given time. So usually those with Mercury and Aquarius, they'll have the iPhone 10, they'll have the PlayStation 4, they'll have the iPad, they'll have all of the new technologies, and they'll have a good understanding of them. They'll also know how to use the internet. They'll also know how to use social media. These people are very good with technology, and they're usually as advanced as far as what technology is representing. They may even be inventive in their nature, which means they can actually create innovation and technology themselves. These individuals are extremely perceptive and very concerned with a balance of what is rational and ideal. So this is similar to a Virgo Mercury vibration, except it's kind of more outside of the box. These individuals are able to use their speech and intelligence to gain unique opportunities in their given field of expertise. The 11th sign is Capricorn, which is associated with the 11th house, which is the house of gains. So often those with Mercury and Aquarius, their intelligence and communication gives them wonderful opportunities. These natives also have a very unique sense of humor and are usually very funny. It's kind of a mix between what we call dry humor, which is associated with Saturn, and wittiness, which is associated with Mercury. So this kind of dry wit is kind of very funny. It can be a little sarcastic though. And these conjunctions allow for the logical to be integrated with the ideal. And therefore, these natives can find themselves as inventors and creators. So it's good if they have a hobby that allows for invention and creation. And this conjunction works especially well in fields of technology, social media, politics, public relations, and the sciences. So now we'll get into the Mars signs a little bit. And Mercury's going back into Scorpio, and Mercury's Scorpio in my natal chart. So this is also significant for me. Now, Mercury has neutral dignity and mixed karmic effect in the Saturn-ruled signs of Aries and Mars-ruled signs of Aries and Scorpio. Mars and Mercury do not have the most auspicious relationship. You could think of the student and the general. These energies are often not that in alignment. The general doesn't want to learn, and the student doesn't want to fight. So these vibrations are somewhat of a challenge to each other. Now, similar, as I mentioned, the bond between a professor and a war general. What do we really have there? Now, it can manifest in a positive way when our messages and our intellect are put into action, because Mars is the planet of action. And so those with Mercury-Mars karmas, it emphasizes that they need to walk the walk even more so, because it's actions which are going to speak louder than words. In other words, for Mercury-Mars people, their words are powerful, but their actions will ultimately speak louder. Now, when Mercury aligns to the vibration of Aries, it encourages a powerful and fierce expression of words. Usually these natives with this conjunction have an expression which is encouraging and supports and motivates and empowers. So it can be a very motivational communication. These people are great motivational communicators. They make great life coaches and stuff like that because they are very motivational in their expression. They're great supporters of others. This conjunction is auspicious for confidence in speech and expression. These people have a lot of confidence depending on the position of what they have to say, and for the individual's actions to have logic and reason and intelligence behind them. So it's possible too, the actions, because of the aspect of Mercury, the actions can have a lot of thought, can have a lot of intelligence behind them. On the more challenging side, though, those with Mercury in Aries can sometimes be confused between an instinctual action and that which makes logical sense. Basically, impulsion and logic. So often those with Mercury in Aries, they are impulsive. And sometimes that impulsiveness gets the better of them, and they forget the intelligence. So sometimes they can be acting out of an impulsive or instinctual place. This confusion can create inaction, laziness, and blocked expression because of lack of decisiveness. So when you're confused between whether to take a logical action or a instinctual action, then again, this can cause you to take no action at all. And usually there will be some aspect where Saturn might be aspecting the Mercury Aries that kind of shows that indecision here. Now, when Mercury enters Scorpio, it encourages a powerful intellectual curiosity. Those with this conjunction often find their intellectual energy and buddhi attracted to their curiosities. And generally, due to the Scorpio vibration, these natives' curiosities are somewhat unique in their nature and outside of the box in their expression. Those with Mercury and Scorpio communicate passionately and intensely because this is Scorpio, very passionate. And usually their expression can be felt on a visceral and a physical level. These natives are oriented towards scientific or logical understanding because of Mercury of the mystical, spiritual, esoteric, occult, medical, and ancient. So they want to use their intellect to understand these really outside of the box things. Therefore, these natives are powerful communicators and messengers of the mystical, occult, and medical knowledges. And my Mercury is in Scorpio in the 10th house, and my knowledge has always been attracted to spirituality, mysticism, reincarnation, moksha, astrology, Ayurveda, all different religion, all of these things which are kind of the Mercury Scorpio vibration. And because these planets are in the 10th house, which is my career, well, then that's kind of the astrology, which is that it's my career to communicate this kind of esoteric knowledge. Now, Mercury has neutral dignity and mixed karmic effect in the sun-ruled sign of Leo. Some Vedic philosophers believe the relationship between the sun and Mercury to be favorable and auspicious one, but it very much has to do with the degree if you have a Mercury-Sun conjunction. Now, Mercury symbolizing the message and the sun representing the soul. This can be a very positive conjunction. When conjunct, this carries and expresses the soul's message confidently, courageously, and with great power. So the sun in the right amount of degree in separation from Mercury gives power to the communication and gives power to the intelligence. And Lord Parashara says that it gives brilliance. Now, therefore, Mercury in Leo, which carries a similar vibration because Leo is ruled by the sun. But when someone has Mercury in Leo, the position of the sun is very important. So you also have to look at the position of the sun with Mercury in Leo, because if it's combust, that could cause all sorts of other aspects as well. It carries a similar vibration. So when looking at whether Mercury in Leo or Mercury-Sun conjunction is favorable, you really have to just consider the degrees of separation. So we're really trying to, anything that Mercury is 11 degrees or more away from the sun is more auspicious than if Mercury is 10 degrees close or closer to the sun because of the combustion. Now, when Mercury enters Leo, it supports the fulfillment of our power and leadership karma in this life, dependent on house position, of course. And it allows one's power and soul fulfillment in this life to be achieved through intelligence and discrimination. So you're meant to use your intelligence and communication to rise to your full power and potential. And so it supports the message itself to be one of strength, power, and inspiration. And that usually those with Mercury and Leo can be very inspiring in their communication. They can make you feel like a leader too. And hopefully in full alignment with the soul's direction and dharma, which is going to come from the sun. So positively, this conjunction brings confidence behind your speech and a powerful strength of your intelligence and a really profound message which can reach to influence the masses and create inspiration. This auspicious effect is dependent on the house position and whether Mercury is functionally benefic or combust. And the challenging aspect of this vibration can be overconfidence. It can be sharp speech. There can be high ego, closed-mindedness, and an overly analytical or critical nature. So even though this manifests as a great power, if it's not balanced properly, it becomes unhealthy ego. Mercury has a neutral dignity and a mixed karmic effect in the moon-ruled sign of Cancer. It's an interesting conjunction. It has some favorable qualities as well. The moon considers Mercury its friend, while Mercury considers the moon its enemy. So this is a very unique kind of karmic relationship in which the moon is very like, oh, Mercury is great. And, you know, considering the story, that's very, the moon is the parent. So, of course, but Mercury might not care so much for the parent. So this means from one perspective, the relationship is beneficial, but from another perspective, a challenge. So that's why this is a mixed karmic effect. You're going to get an auspicious effect from how moon relates to Mercury, but a challenging effect from how Mercury relates to moon. Now, Mercury Cancer combines the intellectual qualities of Mercury with the emotional qualities of the moon. And when we talk about these different conjunctions, it's the intellect combining with what? With the Jupiter, it's with faith. With Mars, it's with action. With Saturn, it's with discipline. Here, it's with the emotion. With the moon, it's with the emotion. This creates a powerful effect in which one's intellectual aspect and emotional aspect are inseparable. This is why it's particularly challenging because logic and emotion are very different energy. But here, logic and emotion are connected. So there's a very strong emotional connection to one's logical understanding of things. These people are deeply emotionally connected to their knowledge. Therefore, emotions and logic are brought up together. And because of this, when one uses their intellect, there are usually deep emotions and feelings present as well. On the positive side, this conjunction can have a nice balance of emotional and logical qualities. And also their writing or expression their words or writing can be deeply emotional and felt on an emotional level by everyone who reads and hears the natives of expression. Let's say you're reading the book of someone who has Mercury in Cancer, the book will make you cry. Let's say you are watching a movie of someone who, the director has Mercury in Cancer, the movie will make you cry. It will make you laugh. It will make you dance. Because basically, the person used their intellect to help bring out emotions in the viewer. So there is an aspect here of their communication is emotional, and you can feel the emotions which they communicate. The challenge of this vibration comes from over emotionality. It's a challenge to balance the logic and the emotion, especially when the intellect or logic is present. So another challenge is that sometimes those with this conjunction can be shy or passive because emotion and logic create shyness. And this can be inhibited in their communication. So because they're too emotional, it's hard for them to communicate sometimes. And often due to the high sensitivity and emotionality in the speech and writing. So basically, sometimes they're afraid to speak. They're afraid to share their truth. Why? Because there's too much emotion behind it. In other words, maybe if they were begin to start talking, they would start crying, and they don't want to cry. So we went through Mercury and all of the different signs to understand the dignity from that perspective, but there are still two unique conditions of Mercury to understand how Mercury karma manifests, and these are the most common conditions. The first is which Mercury is retrograde. It's very interesting to me that of the world and their general knowledge of astrology, how every single person seems to know what Mercury retrograde is. They might not know what their ascendant is. They might not know what a sun sign or a moon sign is, but they know what the retrograde Mercury. So I always think this is interesting. Maybe it's because Mercury retrograde happens so commonly, but ultimately I think it's strange how much the world knows about Mercury retrograde, but not other aspects of astrology. In any case, Mercury, of all Navagraha, is the planet other than Rahu and Ketu that is the most often retrograde. So Mercury retrograde, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, I think it's given too much emphasis. Yes, it's a retrograde energy, which means it's unique in its manifestation, but Mercury is retrograde months and months and months every year. That means it's not that special. Okay, it happens all the time. So again, there's a little too much energy, I think, given a Mercury retrograde, which is why I waited till now to explain it. But it's important to understand how Mercury retrograde is, but it's not like this grand thing that is shocking. It happens all the time. So that is why it is so common. We hear individuals complain of Mercury retrograde in the transit because it's so common. And Mercury's retrograde right now. Initially, when I thought of doing this reading, I scratched my head and I thought, is it good for me to do Mercury retrograde webinar? And I said, yes, it'll be perfect because during Mercury retrograde, it makes it harder for people to talk, which means that everyone will be listening very good. So this is why I thought it would be very beneficial. But so those with, it is normal or familiar for Mercury to be retrograde at times. That's the first point I want to make. The second is that when Mercury is retrograde, it causes the traditional associations and energies of Mercury to manifest its power internally and in a unique manner. So normally Mercury energy manifests externally with speech. But when Mercury is retrograde, the intellectual energy is manifesting internally. So when Mercury is retrograde, that's what's actually happening on with the buddhi. Normally the buddhi is focused outward externally, but here the third eye, the buddhi eye, is looking internally. It's internal, which often means the people with retrograde Mercury are not less intelligent. It is just that they are more intelligent inside than they are when they express it. So oftentimes their intelligence is greater than it can be expressed in words. So these people with Mercury retrograde are very smart, but that intelligence, it's not always going to manifest with speech because of the retrograde. It usually does not manifest with speech. Now, traditionally, Mercury manifests its power through intelligence, discrimination, and communication. Intelligence traditionally has an external manifestation, which is speaking or speech. However, because of the Mercury retrograde, the intellectual energy and the buddhi will not be expressed through speaking alone in a common intellectual manner. So those with Mercury retrograde, they're not the intellectual speakers type, although they can be, and eventually if they work on their speech. But it's possible that their communication or intelligence will be expressed stronger in another method. This is due to the fact that the internal discrimination and understanding is greater within the individual than when it is attempted to be expressed with words and intellectually. So often those with Mercury retrograde, when they try to say what they feel, it does not come out the way they would like. And so when everything is Mercury retrograde, it makes us harder for us to communicate because what we are trying to say, it is harder for it to be communicated with words alone. Those with Mercury retrograde usually find that the intellectual energy is strongest manifested in an unusual or non-traditional method. Since speaking is the most common form of expression for Mercury, when retrograde, the more alternative expressions of Mercury are favored. This includes writing as being the primary. So often people with Mercury retrograde, they can communicate better in writing than they can with speech. And that also their intelligence not only can manifest strong in writing, but comedy, poetry, creative expressions, theater, art, and music. So although it might not manifest strongest with speech alone, which is common, it has a greater power to be expressed stronger in some of these more alternative ways, like writing and art, music, entertainment, and comedy. Mercury retrograde karma encourages the native to work with their intellectual energy in a unique way. Mercury retrograde does not necessarily mean that the individual is not a good speaker. But if they are focusing their intellectual energy towards words and speaking, then often the communication is also unique and non-traditional intellectually. So they might be a good speaker, but they're not going to be speaking in a traditional way. There's going to be a very unique way in which they are expressing themselves. And so often that communication is not intellectual in its nature. It might be powerful and significant, but maybe not necessarily intellectual. Now, of course, you have to look at the sign of Mercury too, to look at the intellectual power and its communication to see, okay, well, if Mercury's in Virgo, these people, or Mercury's in Pisces and retrograde, these people love to speak. So it has an indication that you can still speak, but that ultimately it might be possible that your intelligence is best expressed in alternative ways. Those with, they have a very interesting way of speaking. And that while it might not be grammatically correct, it can still be very powerful. So as far as the communication with speaking, it might not be, valedictorian type speech, but it can certainly be something very powerful and moving. There's just an example to conclude the Mercury retrograde to kind of explain an American artist named, he was the artist formerly known as Prince. He just passed away in the last year. He did the song Purple Rain and Little Red Corvette. But basically, I was looking at Prince's chart, and he had Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde, one of the greatest musical artists, has Mercury retrograde. I thought, this is very interesting. As I looked more into it, I began to listen to his speeches, his interviews. in which he would get interviewed on TV after or before his musical performance. And he could not speak. He whispered. He talks like this, and you can barely hear what he's saying. And he was shy and soft-spoken. But then when it came to his music, it was loud, it was expression, there was sexual energy, and it was powerful and all of this energy. But when it came to him speaking, he talked like this, and you can barely hear him. So he's a perfect example of this energy, which his intelligence and his expression, when manifested creatively, was one of the most powerful things. He won Grammy Award, but he could never do an interview. This is just the nature of Mercury retrograde. Now, when Mercury goes into combustion, this is when the Mercury and the Sun are within 10 degrees of each other. The most intense degrees of combustion occur when the Sun and Mercury are 1 to 5 degrees of conjunction. So this is the most harsh conjunction of Sun and Mercury. Now, when Mercury or Sun are less than 1 degree of separation, it creates an alternative auspicious effect. This effect can be best understood as Mercury being so close to the Sun that they become completely unified as one energy. At this level of conjunction, the soul, the Atma, and the intelligence, Buddha, are connected at a very deep karmic level. So even though the combustion of Mercury is inauspicious, if the combustion is less than 1 degree, it is very auspicious, because then these planets are combining in one force. Now, Mercury combustion in degrees 2 to 10 of separation causes some of the energies of Mercury to get burnt up. As Dr. Vasant Lad likes to say, Mercury gets burnt, roasted, and toasted. That does not mean that the tradition associations of Mercury are not strong. So because Mercury is combust, it does not mean that you are not intelligent or do not have good communicating abilities. That's not what Mercury combustion is about. It just means that at times, when that intellectual energy or buddhi is being used and activated, that there is a strong vulnerability to being burnt out. As Dr. Lad likes to say, burnt out, roasted, and toasted. This means that when the intelligence is being used, if it is used without balance or with too much rajasic or pitta type energy, that it will eventually lose its strength and power for some time until the condition can recover. So as an astrologer, I have a combustion of Mercury. My Mercury and Sun are, I think, 3.5 degrees of separation. So when I'm doing reading, I do one reading, and after that reading, I feel a little bit tired. If I do a second reading that day, by the end of the second reading, I am completely burnt out. My brain feels like tired, I need rest, I need nap, I need time to recover. So basically it shows it's not about the strength of the intelligence, but the endurance of it. So the Mercury combustion relates to the endurance of intelligence. And if the intelligence is used too strongly, it will need time to recover in a state of combustion. So for example, after this webinar, I can't do anything intellectual the rest of the day. Yeah. So now I want to focus on how are we to improve our planetary karma with Mercury. This presentation has been thorough. We went into full detail as to all of the karmas with Mercury, both general and subtle. And then we looked at Mercury's current transit and all of its position in varying dignity to understand what is the nature of Mercury karma and how does it specifically manifest based on position. Now that we have a nice understanding of that, what can we do to improve our planetary karma with Mercury? Now, a lot of times during this webinar, we talk about different awarenesses to help improve our karma. But now we're going over specific upaya, remedy, that are going to be very specific that you can do to improve your planetary karma with Mercury. Now, Mercury rules Wednesday, so the most beneficial day of the week to honor Mercury is today, Wednesday. You can honor Mercury every day if you're a Mercury Mahadasha, Mercury Antardasha, Gemini Lagna, Virgo Lagna, Gemini Mercury, Virgo Mercury. You can honor Mercury every day, but the most beneficial day is Wednesday. We honor Mercury by wearing the color green. And we honor Mercury through traditional Mercury mantra, which we performed at the beginning of this webinar, which includes the full sutra and then the repetition of the tantric or seed sound 108 times. We also honor Mercury through prayer in front of a well-designed Mercury yantra. Now, as far as ancient improvement with Mercury karma, we honor Buddhaji by wearing the gemstones emerald and green tourmaline on the pinky finger. And so here I have a emerald. This is a ruby and a red coral because all of these energies are conjunct in my 10th house. So when I'm doing work, it's helpful for me. So emerald is one of the best gems for Mercury. It is so amazing. It makes you more intelligent. So it increases your IQ, at least a few points. It helps with focus. It helps with concentration. For me, because of combustion with Mercury, it helps me from getting burnt out. It helps me protect my intellectual energy. It helps me stay focused, and it increases it. And so with people with Mercury karma, even if it's challenging, emerald is a very good gem for you to work with because it will improve the condition or quality of your buddhi, your intelligence. I like silver setting for Mercury gemstones, and there are different theories as far as, you know, hand, finger, but my general approach is traditionally speaking, it's the right hand for male and the left hand for female. But I don't believe in these differentiations of gender as much. And so I kind of think that it should be more about the energies that we, on the right side of our body, energies are more active. On the left side of our body, our energies are more passive. So when we want to increase the overall energy of something, we wear it on the right side of the body. We want to decrease the negative energies of something, we remove it over the left hand. So you only wear gems which are in a positive position in your chart on the right hand. If you wear gems which are in a challenging position of your chart, they should be worn on the left hand. And that's only if you're right-handed. If you're on the left hand, it switches back around to the most dominant hand. So it's really about your hand, not right, left, but the hand which is dominant and then the hand which is passive. We also honor Buddhaji Mercury through honoring Vishnu. Okay, so Vishnu is the deva which is often associated with Mercury. And so rituals and traditions of Vishnu mantra are going to be very positive. Specifically, we honor Buddhaji through honoring the incarnation of Vishnu known as Balarama. Okay, we honor Buddhaji through honoring the Gautama Buddha, including rituals and traditional Buddha mantra. I think this is beautiful that the Vedic lineage has integrated Buddhism here. And so basically, Mercury is the planet which is associated with Buddhism. And interestingly enough, why is the planet of intelligence the Buddhist energy? Well, that is because in Buddhism, the goal is nirvana. And in order to get to nirvana, you follow the Eightfold Path. And in order to follow the Eightfold Path, you have to cease the fluctuations of the mind. The fluctuations of the mind take place in our intellectual capacity. So working with the intellect is ultimately also supposed to help us move beyond it. This is kind of that Buddhist path, which is to cease the fluctuations of the mind. And so for Buddhists, I recommend an inclination towards Mercury. And very interestingly enough, my brother, who I had mentioned to you, who has exalted Mercury, is Buddhism. So it can often show this indication. Just want to say hi. We'll rub his belly for good luck. So we also honor Buddhaji through offering green herbs, specifically Brahmi and Tulsi or other fresh herbs, to teachers because of the association with Mercury, friends, by the social, and then also the needy is always positive. So you want to offer green clothes, but the most positive thing to offer in honor of Mercury are fresh green herb. fresh green herb to your teacher. So the best thing that you could do is to be a fresh herb to your teacher, but anything green to a teacher, friend, or needy is very positive. And the needy is also very positive for Mercury because Mercury and Saturn are friends. Saturn is connected to the needy. So working with the needy is very auspicious for Mercury. Now, moving on from the ancient perspective, kind of lifestyle aspects. What can we do in our lifestyle, in our daily life, to improve our planetary karma with Mercury? And the first is that it will greatly aid and improve our karma with Mercury to empower speaking and verbal communication in every aspect. This means that we should always communicate and speak our truth, and that in our evolution with Mercury, every single opportunity we have in our lives to speak or express ourselves must be taken. So if we want to improve our planetary karma with Mercury, we try to create opportunities for ourselves which we can speak and express. And if an opportunity comes, it must be taken. In other words, if you have given an opportunity in which you are to speak or in which you are supposed to express yourself or to communicate, and that you don't, it will hurt your karma with Mercury. So these opportunities of speaking, especially public speaking or speaking in front of a large group, are the best opportunities for us to improve our planetary karma with Mercury. And so taking something like a public speaking class can always be very positive. It will also greatly aid and improve our karma with Mercury to empower other forms of expression other than speaking, especially if Mercury is retrograde. This includes all forms of written communication, from the purely academic writing to that which is creative and brilliant. So all types of writing, really not limited. We will improve our planetary karma when we use our intelligence or buddhi to provide a service. We talked about this with Virgo. We also talked it as a karmic element with Mercury because of the Vaishya caste, the merchant caste, which is associated with Mercury. This includes, in the merchant or business sense, providing some type of service which might be financially rewarding. This means that you could have, you could be offering a travel agency, you could be offering a business consultation, but basically you are offering some type of service which might be financially beneficial to you or to the individual that you're providing the service to. Ideally, this service would carry some of the individual message which the soul carries, which we talked about relates to the sign and position of Mercury. So it's okay to provide a service in honor of Mercury and to make money off of that service. But you have to make sure that that service you're providing is in alignment with your message. But if ultimately the most positive thing you can do is a service that is selfless or humanitarian. This ultimate service towards humanity, which has no financial reward. And this is called seva, which is an offering to God, which is service to God. When we go to my guru's events, she has a long line of people signing up for seva to help do offering, to help create this kind of selfless service energy. We will improve our planetary karma with Mercury when we use our intelligence to improve the quality or condition of something, purification. This is usually an analytical process to improve something to its ideal state. So as soon as you find something that's, let's say, not in its best condition, you improve your karma with Mercury by using your intelligence to make that thing better. So you use your intelligence to perform this analysis, in which the flaws must be criticized and removed, and the strengths are empowered and focused on. Okay? One of the ways of improving things to their ideal condition through this analytical process, it actually does improve our quality of relationship with Mercury when we use our intelligence to improve things to their higher quality. We will also improve our planetary karma when we use our intelligence in the pursuit of knowledge. This is the teacher karma, the student karma, which is associated with Mercury. This includes all forms of education, but specifically those which are intellectually oriented, okay? So we improve our karma with Mercury when we learn, when we study. But when we're studying or learning something intellectual, that's even stronger to improve our karma with Mercury. This includes certain fields like philosophy, psychology, literature, academia, history, language, mathematics, and much more. Okay? And this includes formal education at all levels, which is helpful to improve our karma with Mercury, but also includes an intellectual knowledge, which can be one-on-one, like a tutor, a mentor, a guide, or a guru. If the knowledge that you are receiving from them is intellectual or logical, it will help improve your Mercury karma. We will improve our planetary karma with Mercury when we use our intelligence to be humorous. We improve this is one of the most enjoyable ways to improve our connection with Mercury, is to just try to have a good sense of humor. Humor is connected to the wit, and wit is connected to the intelligence and Mercury. Therefore, if we use our intelligence, our buddhi, to come up with jokes or funny things, and then express those jokes at an opportune moment, at the right time, then we will improve our karma with Mercury. So making a good joke and other people laughing is a boon from Mercury. We also improve our karma with Mercury whenever we engage in activities or thinking patterns which stimulate the intelligence. So whenever we do activities that are intellectually oriented, this is very good for improve our karma with Mercury. Mercury controls the buddhi, and therefore one of the best things that we can do to improve our Mercury is to use our discretion, to use our buddhi. Activities which support intelligence and improve our karma with Mercury include chess, listening to classical music, reading, writing, speaking, poetry, comedy, theater, learning, teaching, calculation, analysis, and math. Mercury is a social planet, and so greatly improves our karma with Mercury to perform these activities with friends or in groups. The best thing you can do is combine them. This is like a book or a chess club, which is a group of intellectual people meeting for an intellectual purpose. There's nothing better that you can do than to have these kind of meetings. It could even be an astrology club, Jyotish club, improvisational comedy groups, writing and speaking groups. This is all very positive to improve our planetary karma. Because I have to use my intelligence so often with the readings, I have to keep my intelligence sharp. So I always try to activate this Mercury karma early in the day. I wake up, I have my cup of tea or coffee, and then I immediately play chess, usually for 1 to 2 hours, 1 or 2 games, depending on how long the games take. And this will be really helpful because then afterwards, my intellect is stimulated and I'm ready to begin this work. So it's very helpful when we improve our karma with Mercury that we do activities that enhance our intelligence, like chess, classical music, reading, writing, speaking, poetry, and all creative expressions as well. So to improve the planetary karma with Mercury, the mind, the intellectual mind, cannot be allowed to be dull or tamasic. Okay, now one of the things that is common that you see nowadays is the diseases of dementia, which we call Alzheimer's. Now, part of the reason that Alzheimer's is so common, although there are many explanations, it has to do with the water and the food and the air pollution. But on a deeper level, from a karmic perspective, the Alzheimer's occurs when we stop using our intelligence. In other words, you are more vulnerable to these diseases of the consciousness affecting you when you are not sharp anymore. So if you can focus to improve your karma by always doing these activities which are intellectually oriented, it will also be like prevention for any type of mental this type of dementia type illness or deterioration of the consciousness. So especially for those who have Mercury in the 6th house or the 8th house or the 12th house, they have to be they have to keep their mind sharp. The Rajasic Sattvic qualities of the mind must be emphasized and empowered over the Tamasic to improve our karma with Mercury. Therefore, to improve our karma with Mercury, we must keep our minds and intellect stimulated, which means this long list of activities that I mentioned, they should be done on a daily basis to always keep the mind sharp. Now, of course, depending on the work that you do, you might automatically do these things. But if you don't do them, to keep your karma with Mercury good, it's important to incorporate these things. Even if you can't do them every day, you should do them 1 week per Wednesdays, on Wednesdays. Now, when looking at the Ayurvedic remedy for Mercury, it gets rather unique because Mercury is a tridoshic planet. It does not have a specific dosha. And actually, Mercury's balance of dosha is greatly influenced by the signs and planets it's traveling with and is aspected by. So the dosha of Mercury is highly influenced by the energies that it's with, more so than other planets. The sun will always be Pitta, no matter what planet it is with. Mars will always be Pitta, no matter what planet it is with. But Mercury, its dosha changes by which planet or sign that it's with. Now, so therefore, we can't just say, oh, there's a general way with this dosha to improve your planetary karma with Mercury. You have to look at the condition of your Mercury to understand which dosha is influencing it. Is it a Vata, Pitta, or Kapha planet or sign? Mercury, while being tridoshic, certain Vedic lineages believe primary dosha of Mercury to be Vata because of the wind quality, high wind quality of Mercury. Communication is wind. So there is this vibration here that even though Mercury is tridoshic, it is of my personal opinion that it is at least 50 to 75% Vata. Okay, so now this can be changed by its influence, but Mercury on its own, Vata. Therefore, often when dealing with health difficulties related to wind element type Mercury, we are dealing with Vata. Therefore, these individuals need Vata balancing lifestyle and diet. Vata element is strongest when Mercury is in an air sign or conjunct with a Vata planet. So you know to focus on the Vata aspect of remedy with Mercury if your Mercury is in Aquarius, if your Mercury is with Saturn, if your Mercury is with Rahu, or this, you know to work with Vata then. Now, there is also a strong Pitta element of Mercury because of its connection to intelligence. Intelligence comes from Pitta and the Buddhi. So due to the Pitta element aspect of Mercury, we also have to work on balancing the Rajasic qualities of the mind. Usually the health difficulties which relate to Vata physically are Vata, are with Mercury are Vata, but then the physical issues are Pitta. The mental issues are Pitta and the physical issues are Vata. So we have to work on balancing the Rajasic quality of the mind. And so this might become as hypercritical or an overly analytical nature. Those people need Pitta balancing lifestyle and diet. Pitta element is strongest in Mercury when it's in a fire sign like Scorpio, Aries or Sagittarius, and or conjunct with the Pitta planet like Mars or the Sun or Ketu. So now we have just finished this portion of the webinar, how to improve our planetary karma. And now I have some key examples from the community that we will go into detail to look at some specific examples of the nature of the Mercury karma for the individual and also how to improve the planetary Mercury karma with the individual. Before we get started on this portion, does a 3 to 5 minute break sound okay?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Great.
You're up first, Medora, when we get back.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Namaste, Madhuraji. How are you enjoying the webinar so far?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Good. So let's take a look at a very close friend of mine's chart who had sent it in today, the beloved Madhuraji. Madhura, your question was how to improve my planetary karma with Mercury based on my natal chart.
Yes.
You're Libra Lagna, and you have Mercury in Taurus in the 8th house with conjunction of Sun and Venus.
Right.
So when looking at how to improve planetary karma with Mercury in this natal chart, we find Mercury at 27 degrees, conjunct with the Sun and Venus in the Venus-ruled sign of Taurus, posited in the 8th house. Sun is 6 degrees from Mercury, and Venus is 8 degrees from Mercury. Mercury has good dignity in Taurus and has favorable conjunction with friendly planets, Sun and Venus. So Mercury friend with Sun and Venus here. Sun is 6 degrees, so there is mild combustion of Mercury, but it's not less than 5 degrees, so it's not heavy combustion. So, you know, as far as the burnout, you're vulnerable to it at times, but not heavily. And but overall, Mercury appears to be very comfortable. The position of 8th house, however, does present some unique attribute and challenging karmic aspects too. This conjunction gives a nice unification of intellect, soul, and creativity / the beauty of life. Because of the conjunction of the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, life and the soul and the mind, they're all connected, which is quite beautiful, I think. So also, the position of these planets in the 8th house draws the intelligence and logic to unique hidden aspects of knowledge, including mysticism, occult, spiritual, astrological, and medical. So, for example, how my Mercury is in Scorpio, well, Mercury in the 8th house carries similar vibration, in which one's intelligence is attracted to the curiosity, to that which is unknown, to that which is outside of the box, which that might be mystical or esoteric in its natures. So I think that's this. So in order to satisfy the karmic situations that Mercury is encouraging in your chart, you must continue to grow in your mystical knowledge throughout your life. And so basically, Mercury is only satisfied if you're continuing to deepen your knowledge of all of your curiosities, specifically these kind of more mystical areas, which includes all spiritualities and religions, but also Ayurveda, Jyotish, and yoga, also all forms of healing, all forms of mysticism. So all of these areas, you must continue to always be deepening your knowledge in these areas. And that could be shown for astrology too, that one of the ways that you satisfy your karma with Mercury is by continuing to always be a student in this area of your life, which I have no doubt that you will do. Now,
Yes.
in order, due to Mercury's position of conjunction with the Sun and Venus, this mystical knowledge must be deep from the soul level. So it's not just intellectual knowledge, but on some level, it's the knowledge what your soul has as well, or the knowledge what your soul is seeking. And it also has to be able, the knowledge also has to be able to provide pleasure, beauty, and quality to the life. That is why I thought of astrology, because that knowledge, it provides pleasure and quality to those individual lives. But basically, this knowledge what you are seeking, by its conjunction with Venus, it could either benefit you materially, because Venus is the Lord of wealth, which means this knowledge could benefit you at some point financially. But ultimately, there's a connection here that it shall have to do with the beauty of life and the quality of life. So that will be helpful in terms of the knowledge as well. Now, due to Mercury's position in Taurus, the logical and intellectual will be used for accumulation, success, and acquisitions. And so this is a natural vibration. It's always good when Mercury is in Taurus, because it is like a deep well of knowledge. It is a very deep well of knowledge here. So there is this aspect here by the position of Taurus that you will be accumulating knowledge, that this knowledge gets stronger and stronger and accumulates. And that accumulation of knowledge will have to do with your success as well. But with the Mercury in Taurus, it has good memory. So the knowledge that you are acquiring, it should be knowledge that you are able to remember, which is very good in this circumstance here, because at some level you're going to switch from the student to more of a teaching role. Mm-hmm. Now, so since this conjunction is posited in the 8th house, it suggests that the knowledge you shall acquire with your intellect should be mystical, occult, or esoteric in its nature. This means to improve your planetary karma with Mercury, you must use your intellect to first learn and have deep comprehensive knowledge of various mystical or occult fields. This includes Jyotish, Ayurveda, yoga, shamanism, and tantra, just as some possibilities. On a deeper level as well, by moksha influence of 8th house, because the 8th house represents knowledge of life and death. It represents knowledge of the afterlife and some knowledge as to the moksha process. So there should also be a certain amount of knowledge that you develop about what reincarnation is and the afterlife process. But because of Mercury, you will be able to understand it intellectually as well. Now, and that's why I think books about the afterlife will be very good for you. So after the wealth of comprehensive knowledge in the various unique areas is complete, then Mercury will seek for you to share the knowledge you have acquired, which is basically you will go from being a student of well, you'll always be a student, but you will also be activated as teacher. But but first, all of the comprehensive knowledge must be there. So there's the learning process. As we mentioned, it manifests in 3 parts, right?
Right.
The learning process, then we represent that information, and then we begin to share it. But I see this as a strong energy in your chart because Sun is Mercury. This is your soul's direction. This is your soul's fulfillment. So after you feel like you have the necessary amount of knowledge, I have no doubt that you will begin to share it. Because that's what Mercury ultimately wants, is for you to be a messenger of this information. So this is the second remedy for how to improve your planetary karma with Mercury, is to share and spread all of the knowledge that you have acquired through speech, writing, and technology.
Yes. Wow. Great. Amazing.
Good. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for the analysis of the karma. Really, really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And does that resonate with you?
Yes, completely.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, great. Wonderful. That was really fun, Medora, and I hope in future webinars we can look at some of your karmas with the other planets as well.
Yes, sure, definitely. My pleasure.
So is Joshua here?
Yes, I think, yes, she's here. I'll make a panelist.
Joshua Joshi.
Yes.
Hey, Joshua, just let me try to unmute you there. Hey, Josh.
Okay. Hey.
Namaste.
What's up? Namaste.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
And you're joining us from
London.
From London. Wonderful.
Yeah.
How have you enjoyed the webinar so far?
So far, it's been absolutely amazing.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that,
yeah,
brother.
Yeah.
And it's been nice getting to know you over these past few weeks.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we'll be doing some work together in the future as well.
Please God, yeah, maybe.
So my question, or your question, is you mentioned that your Lagna and Moon are in Gemini.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Gemini, so you're ruled by Mercury. And that Mercury is in the 6th house of Scorpio, along with Venus.
Yep.
Okay, so we have Mercury-Venus conjunction, and it's actually just over 1 degree, so barely over 1 degree of separation.
Yep.
And so what is the realistically about this placement? So basically, what is the nature of this planet?
Can I also add something to this? I mean, because it's in Scorpio, and the ruler is Mars, and Mars is in Gandanta. So if you can give that angle as well. Right?
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. So first, let's look at the position. Now, you mentioned your Gemini Lugna, and so with the rulership from Mercury, your ruling planet is going to be a big karmic player. So just by the fact that you're ruled by Mercury means that Mercury is going to have a more significant lifelong influence than other planets. And on some level, because of its influence on the Lugna, it is connected to some aspect of your Dharma. Okay. Now, Mercury has position in the sign of Scorpio, conjunct with Venus, just barely over 1 degree of separation. This conjunction has posited itself in the 6th bhava, which relates to the artha aim of life, your prosperity, success, and financial security. Now, that's the aim of life, not the area. Now, generally speaking, Mercury does well in Scorpio, even though the relationship between Mars and Mercury can be challenging. This is because the nature of Scorpio, more so than the relationship between Mars and Mercury. But as you mentioned, there's the Mercury is in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars, and the Mars is in Gandanta. This gives a certain amount of signification to that rulership as well. So you definitely do want to address the Mars rulership there. This relationship between Mars and Mercury in your chart can be challenging. This is because buddhi and intellectual capacity combine auspiciously with our curiosity and investigative nature when Mercury is in Scorpio. This means that you will have good intelligence looking at Mercury's sign alone, but that often that is intelligence is attracted to vibrations which relate to Scorpio, similar to Medora and I, like mysticism, occult, medical, spiritual, and kind of outside of the box curiosities. Also, Mercury is very friendly with Venus, and so you find yourself with a very unique Buddha Shukra yoga. The 6th house is considered upachayasthanas, which means a growth, is a marker for evolution through self-improvement. This means the conditions and qualities of these houses get better along with our growth and evolution throughout our lifetimes. So basically, the rewards of these houses are basically related to how great we can grow and evolve. So that's important. Generally speaking, this is considered a challenging house for any planet to be posited in, but is a natural house for the energy of Virgo, because Virgo is the 6th sign and the 6th house is Virgo house, which is, so therefore the position of Mercury in the 6th house is actually considered a signification position, and Mercury gets stronger in the 6th house. Even though it's a challenging house, it's more comfortable than most planets in the 6th house. Mercury is one of the most comfortable planets in the 6th house. So in your karmic evolution with Mercury, you will be greatly rewarded through Upatraya, which is the spiritual evolutionary process through your self-improvement and growth. And we can pejoratively understand this as self-help. So there's a strong connection between bettering yourself and self-help, and also the karma with Mercury here. Now, Mercury and Venus are so close in degree that much of their energies are unified and combined. So there's not, and the sun is far enough away there, so there's not there's not any combustion going on. Much of the energies are unified and combined. So on some level, your intellect and your senses, because Shukra is the lord of the senses, are integrated and combined. So there's an integration of the sensual and the logical. This is actually somewhat beneficial. It kind of shows there's somewhat of a beauty in the communication as well. When we talked along earlier with the combination of Mercury and Venus, Venus can really give a lot of refinement and sophistication and beauty to the energies of the Mercury. Yeah. So in this sense, on some inherent level, this is integrated and combined. This can also be understood as logic and beauty being combined, or reason and pleasure are being combined. So sometimes these energies are unified here. So since conjunction is in the sixth house, you may find the karma associated with the work that you do or the services that you provide. So the sixth house has a strong karmic suggestion to work. This is also an inherent energy of Mercury through its connection to Virgo. However, with sixth house activation, the work that we are doing might not always resonate on the deepest level as our career or life purpose. Okay, so these two energies that are activating, they're activating the second aim of life, which is finances, prosperity, and success, and the work that you're doing. But the work that you're doing, which is activated here, is very different from the work that might resonate in the most positive way. The work in the sixth house often does not resonate with us in the most positive way. Oftentimes, the work in the sixth house, it really feels like work, okay? Which means that we might be getting money from it, but it's not fulfilling or it's not rewarding. It feels like work. It feels like service. It feels like maybe I'm putting more in than I'm getting out, or that this isn't deeply connected. So a heavy activation here does bring in certain suggestions that you will often find yourself doing certain work that might not be the most rewarding, that might not be the deepest connected to your life purpose. But at the same time, the combination of Mercury and Venus should be making you capable of doing that work well. In other words, that hyper capability aspect, and also bringing some creativity into it. So even though it might not ultimately resonate as the greatest thing, you're still able to do it in a very unique way. So those are just some of the things that, yeah, so the work in the sixth house feels like work, which means we are providing a service, and due to this conjunction, that which you provide combines intellect and creativity with mysticism, the unknown, and the spiritual by the Scorpio. Through Artabhava here, to improve karma with Mercury, you would have great potential yourself to use your intellect and creativity to provide a unique and possibly healing service. So if you can take that intellectual gift and combine it with the creative gift, and to create that into some type of service that you could provide that would benefit others, I could see this really benefiting you. So again, I think of this as kind of a business type situation, but it could also be more selfless or humanitarian. But I think specifically by the sixth house, this service that you're providing, it should have some type of financial reward. So that's why I said possibly a healing service, because the sixth house is the first three stages of disease. Samprapti, Ayurveda has 6 stages of disease. So in the first 3 stages of disease, they haven't made any permanent changes of the body. They've just created some imbalance and aggravation. So it's not like the service that you would providing would necessarily be curing cancer, but maybe people who struggle with certain health difficulties, you're giving them a better quality of their life. You know, or something like that. Something I was feeling along you helping the quality of other people's life. And with Venus, it should be pleasurable. So I certainly feel that the service you're providing could be pleasurable in its nature as well. Now, Mercury's strong influence and position in sixth house means you growing and evolving every time you focus your intellectual energies on mysticism, spirituality, or service to the betterment of humanity. Eventually, through this evolutionary vibration, because of the Upachaya sixth house, although it might feel like work with little material gain at certain times, ultimately, to continue to provide this gift to others through service or seva, which again, I said this because there might be not as much reward as there should be, that eventually you will also gain individual success, reputation, and financial prosperity, because it's all supporting the second aim of life, Artabhava. So even though the work feels like work, it might not always be the most rewarding, eventually it will pay off here with success, reputation, and prosperity.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does all of that resonate, brother?
Well, it sounds good. I mean, it sounds sort of perfect. Because the funny thing is, my professional, skilled at creating softwares and applications and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
see the Venus element, working with the UI and UX side of things.
Exactly. It's that nice combination of creative and technological energies.
Yeah, but as you said, like it's, I don't sort of enjoy it because it seems like work. However, I do enjoy the mystical side of things, spiritual side of things more. But I guess if that becomes work, then that also will become sort of,
Yeah. Now, you're just to touch on this, because this is not specifically Mercury, but because we talked about sixth house and work, it's worth mentioning that Pisces rules your 10th house of career, and Jupiter's in Leo in third house. Whenever Pisces is in the house of career, the more rewarding work might be intuitive.
Right. Okay.
So it's saying, it's possible for, if you work in some intuitive work, this will be very positive. It might be more rewarding, but and it also, Jupiter's in Leo, so it might help with your prosperity. You could become a leadership. So I would just, even though this is the work, which is the majority of hours that you have spent, whether it's astrology or something like a mystical oriented religious path, but basically there's something there that's also could either be a hobby, that it could be work that you do as well.
Right. And then is the Gandhanda position of Mars?
Yeah.
How's that influencing the whole bigger picture?
So the
that's
Gandhanda influence of Mars, very interestingly enough, usually is a good position for Mars, is going to be basically, so by its connection to the third house is ambition and motivation. Mars is very comfortable in the third house because this is a house where energy is needed, and then Mars is the planet of energy. So even though the work that you're doing will feel like work, and you should always kind of have the energy to do it.
Yep.
In other words, Mars is supporting the energy here Mars is actually giving you ambition and motivation to do this work.
Yep.
And Jupiter kind of orienting it more to the career life purpose, a different kind of motivation.
Yeah.
It was nice to look at your chart with you, brother.
One last thing. I mean, as of now, if you look at the current transit, I think Mercury and Saturn are in Sagittarius at 4 degrees, and I think my moon is also at 4 degrees. It's quite an interesting observation.
Sure. So Saturn would be heavily aspecting your moon there, and your Lagna. So that would create a lot of delays and obstacles and challenges at the time. But Mercury there would at least be helping you to, you would be able to understand those things. In other words, your ability to logically understand that should be able to give you some peace of mind to know that that's temporary.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope to see more of you in the future, brother.
Yep. Please go. Yeah. Okay.
Namaste. Okay, George.
Yes, so I think we have him. Yes. I'll promote into the panelist.
Hi there.
Hi, George.
Hi, everybody.
How's it going?
I'm fine, thank you. Happy birthday, brother.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. I got your note this morning. Thank you so much. Yeah. Just give me one moment. I
Take your time.
just have a note. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'll be right
Sure.
back. 1 second.
Most egy perc szünet van.
Hello, George.
Hello again.
Thank you for your patience. So, the question that you sent in is, my birth dasha is ruled by Mercury, which Mercury has not so good position in Rashi. Being in the 12th house in Gandanta and quite close to the galactic center in Mula Nakshatra, the deity of this nakshatra is Nariti, the goddess of destruction, she who has the power to ruin, destroy, and break things apart. Despite all of my good intentions, precaution and mindfulness, it happened to me several times in my life, both in the professional, 6th house Gemini, and spiritual area, 9th house Virgo, to cause troubles, to destroy and break things apart with my communication, and also having Rahu in the 2nd house, or Mercury itself being in the 2nd house from Chandra Lagna, shows again the troubles I might be able to cause with my communication or speech. How should I improve my karma with Mercury?
That's right.
Here we have George's chart. For those of you who have been attending these webinars, it might be looking a little bit familiar now. So when looking at the basic levels of your Mercury karma, you have done a good analysis yourself, as you always do. You mentioned Mula Nakshatra and Nariti and how that might have caused you certain troubles in your Mercury karma. You also astutely noted Buddha's position in Moksha Bhava and at Gandanta point in 0 degree. This conjunction, many indications that are both auspicious and positive, but also comes with some challenges. With Nariti influence in Mula Nakshatra, with Narit can also bring us closer to moksha. So I wanted to mention that. With Nariti influence in Mula, it is noted that Mariti also brings us closer to moksha. So as you mentioned, being connected to destruction, but also connected to moksha. Mercury in Gandanta is, sometimes Nariti is called the goddess of death. Mercury in Gandanta in Moksha Bhava has profound signification for one's spiritual evolution. In other words, your spiritual evolution and your moksha process is connected with Mercury. And although we touched on that a little bit in this webinar, I like your example as a good example of that connection between our Mercury karma and moksha. So ultimately, these spiritually united your relationship with Mercury and with moksha. This connection between moksha and Mercury could manifest in 2 ways, as these are not mutually exclusive. First is that your path to moksha requires a certain amount of your intellectual discrimination. And for you, this conjunction in Sagittarius, it also has a lot to do with morals, ethics, and principles, basically being a good person. Therefore, your intellect is vital to spiritual evolution, and ultimately suggesting that even though Mercury rules 6th and 9th bhava activation also emphasizing the spiritual evolutionary process, which falls back into the 12th house. also that connects some of the work from the 6th house, which is Artha Bhava, with the moksha elements in the 12th house as well. So everything's kind of going back to moksha. Ultimately suggesting on some level, because of all energy travels back into 12th house, that the orientation with Mercury is to moksha. Therefore, 12th house indicates certain losses, sudden changes, lack of groundedness or stability in the material world, again, which orients you towards a more spiritual evolutionary aspect at the sacrifice of the work material from the 6th house aspect. Therefore, the second aspect I really wanted to mention from a remedial perspective to improve the karma with Mercury and align to this kind of 12th house Mercury Bhava, it would suggest that ultimately there must be no attachment towards one own's intellectual, rational, or logical understanding of things. Because whenever there are planets, things in the 12th house, we have to give up that planet for moksha. We have to give up of those energies. So here, in order for you to get to moksha, there has to be some giving up of the intellect. There has to be giving up of the logic. So on some ways, an over-intellectual focus could be seen as somewhat of as an obstacle. Therefore, the second aspect, there could be no attachment towards one's intellectual or rational understanding. That also with this conjunction, one cannot be too attached to one's memories either. Mercury and the 12th house has this letting go of memories because of Mercury's connection to them. Ultimately here from 12th Bhava influence, it might be suggesting that even though the intellectual energy is used to understand what moksha is, your understanding of reincarnation and moksha through everything that you've studied, you had to use your intellect to get there, but that ultimately that your surrender of your intellectual understanding is the greatest moksha of all.
Thank you so much. An amazing analysis as usual. Although I have missed the first part of the webinar. Well, you know, Mercury is retrograde, and I arrived a little bit late at home. I forget to add to my question. Does that mean anything, or certainly it means something that my Mercury in the D9 in the Navamsha is in my Lagna, so therefore it has a Digbala, it has a directional strength over there.
Certainly does. Yeah, and whenever a planet is in the 12th house in natal chart and in the Lagna in Navamsha, it shows a very interesting karma. It kind of shows that although it might be manifesting these aspects that we talked about, that ultimately the D9, I like to call it shortly the Dharma chart. And then the Lagna in the D9 is the first Dharma house in the Dharma chart. So even though ultimately you are to surrender all of these things for your spiritual evolution, it's part of your Dharma. You know, like your intellect, your strength, your logic, it's part of who you are. It's part of your Dharma. Ultimately, though, I don't know. I guess I'm sure you find interesting the idea of using the intellect to understand what moksha is, but then eventually surrendering that. But eventually, because of the Mercury Lagna in the D9, it is also part of your Dharma to use your intelligence and to be an intelligent person.
I see. Thank you. Only a short mention. I think that being a Buddhist practitioner for more than 15 years, I think that I'm doing my best to worship and to improve my planetary karma with Mercury.
Definitely.
Because,
and Mercury in 12th house, which means moksha and Buddhism are deeply connected. This shows that your version of moksha could be very much nirvana.
Wow, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Happy birthday again, and namaste.
Thank you, George G. Namaste. Okay, the last question that we have here is Dinesh Ji.
Okay, I'll make him panelist. Dinesh ji?
जी बोलो हेलो
Hey,
Namaste.
Dinesh Ji,
नमस्ते
can you hear me?
नमस्ते जी
Can you hear me well?
हाँ नमस्ते जी हैप्पी yes 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 of course I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Happy you were able to attend our webinar today.
Happy birthday to you.
Madhura Ji, I guess his internet's a little shaky.
Yes. Dinesh ji?
First of all,
It's not coming out clear. I don't really understand.
Dinesh ji? Uh,
Well, the most important thing is that he's here, so
yes.
we can have
Yes,
the
yes.
question answered. So the
Yes,
question,
right.
hello. Kindly guide me how
yes yes
I improve aspects related to Mercury in my life, and how the position of Mercury is either making my life easy or difficult.
yes yes
I like your question a lot, especially because of the unique position of Mercury in your chart. I mean, immediately you see this, you're like, wow, this is good material.
yes yes
You have an debilitated retrograde conjunction. So this is really good material to look at Mercury karma. Now, when you're looking at your query as to Mercury's position, influence, and how to improve karma, we must look at the position and find a strange phenomenon, okay? At an initial glance, we observe Mercury retrograde
yeah
in position of debilitation of Pisces in Lagna at 12 degree, in conjunction with Mars at 9 degrees, so 3 degrees of separation. This certainly creates a mixed karmic effect for Mercury, and a very powerful one as well. When a debilitated planet is retrograde, a phenomenon occurs and it begins to act exalted and auspiciously at times. Mercury and Mars conjunction here provides a powerful effect. On some level, one's instincts and actions will be deeply integrated with the logical and the rational. Ultimately, a balance between the two is sought, which all actions have great thought and intellect before them and part of them. On the challenging side, this conjunction manifests to favor impulse over logic or reason at times. Mercury debilitation or exaltation retrograde effect causes one's communication to manifest in an unusual expression. Although the conjunction with Mars shows an emphasis towards action versus words, the statement, actions speak louder than words, my friend, is especially true for you as relates to your nature and your karma with Mercury. However, this debilitation will act exalted, and what you are communicating will be coming from an extremely proud, deep, and well thought out place, and these communications have the power to cause great influence, changes, and transformation. To improve the planetary karma with Mercury, specific to your chart, Dinesh, a focus on the
जी
balance with intelligence and action. There is both a challenge and blessing in this area, and the blessing is realized by striking a proper balance between these two. This means when it comes to actions and the impulsiveness behind them should be completely avoided. So you should never be impulsive behind your action. And a great amount of logic and intelligence should be integrated into the actions before it's taken. So I want you to think real heavily before any actions. In other words, is this action I'm about to take considered smart? Is this action that I'm about to take rational or logical? Does it make sense? These are the questions I want you to ask. Answering these questions before you take any actions will help to improve your karma with Mercury. Also, you should not think or speculate for the thought's sake alone. You should not think for thinking's sake because of Mars-Mercury conjunction. But in your chart, the thoughts or speculation should be put into action. Therefore, thoughts should be oriented to lead towards positive actions in due time, not for thoughts or speculations or sake alone. So I really only want you to focus on your thinking if it can lead toward action.
Okay. Okay. How can I improve my communication? Hello?
Hello. What was the question?
How can I improve my communication?
So to improve your communication with this vibration, it's going to be really helpful for you to kind of focus your energy towards intellectual things. So you need to be speaking, reading, writing, and expressing yourself whenever possible. Okay. Thank you, Dineshji.
It's really difficult for me. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, now to conclude our webinar today, I want to look at Yoganandaji's chart. This was voted on by various members of the astrological community on my page. Now, when looking at Yoganandaji karma with Mercury, let's first at the fullness of Buddha position. Now, Mercury is in the 5th house in Sagittarius Rashi, okay, at Gandanta point, much like our friend George, in conjunction with Sun at 23 degrees. Mercury generally has neutral, friendly position in Sagittarius and allows one's communications to be ethically, morally, philosophically, and spiritually oriented. This is certainly true for Yoganandaji, who embodied the value and teachings of the yamas and niyamas and shared that message with the world. This guy's Mercury karma was very evolved because he knew what his message was, he embodied that message, and he shared that message. So he's manifesting the Mercury karma on all 3 levels. So some of the most auspicious effect of Yogananda Mercury relates to the position in 5th house, conjunct with Mercury 23 degrees apart. There is no combustion of Mercury here, so it can act independently and show strong intelligence without burnout. In other words, Yogananda is not going to get burnt out. But also, conjunction with Sun provides expression at a soul level and brilliance. So basically, the Sun and Mercury are perfect degree of separation from each other. Also, of this karma is concentrated in 5th house of Dharma and education. Therefore, there is a strong messenger dharma for Yoganandaji. It is part of his dharma to be messenger that is coming with the soul's wisdom from Sun. The 5th house has significations with dharmas which are connected to our past lifetimes. And therefore, these karmas as a messenger of truth, spirituality, yoga, and righteousness are from Yoganandaji's past lifetimes as well. This isn't the first time that Yogananda was an ambassador of his teachings. So our time has gone very long today. It's currently, we've gone almost 4 hours.
Yes.
So I don't think we're going to do any live questioning today, but I really hope that everyone enjoyed how to improve our planetary karma with Mercury. It was such a great honor for me to talk about this wonderful planet. Oftentimes when people looking at chart, they forget about Mercury. Mercury is such an important planet for us to work our throat chakra, for our evolution in terms of our message and our intelligence and our communication, and should be honored equally along with every other planet. So I hope everyone really enjoyed this webinar today.
Yes, truly, we all enjoyed the webinar, and you actually covered everything about Mercury, all aspects of Mercury, including combustion, retrogression, and remedies, Ayurveda, and examples. So thank you so much, Kṣaṇāti. And it's your birthday, but still you are here and you have given us 4 hours of webinar, and it's really amazing. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madhura ji.
All the participants, thank you so much for attending the webinar. You've all the whole series of how to improve our planetary karma, and we look forward for your participation. And do check out our YouTube channel as well, and we will be really happy to answer the questions under the videos, comments,
Yes, please
as
come
much as possible.
anytime on the video.
Yeah, and you can contact him on the details mentioned on the screen. So thank you so much, all of you, for attending the webinar, and thank you so much for being there with us.
Thank you, Madhurji.
Thank you, Kṣaṇāti, once again.
Thank you, Madhurji.
And
Special thanks to Sunil John as well. Always thinking of you.
yes, he's always there. Thank you, and bye-bye, everybody.
Namah Shivaya.